All right, good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Nice, sleepy Friday morning. Hope everyone's nice and toasty. It's freezing outside. Thank you all for being here. My name is Senator Andrew Gennardis, representing the 22nd District in Southern Brooklyn. I chair the Civil Service and Pensions Committee. We're joined by Senators Thomas and Jackson. Senator Stavisky, who is helping with this hearing, could not make it. She had a scheduling conflict, but she sends her greetings. Today is kind of like a little bit of a different kind of hearing. There's no bill that we're marking up. There's no issue that we're trying to solve. It's like a legislative book report, really trying to explore the idea of creating a pipeline or strengthening a pipeline that that we have in some different forms across the state and across the city, from our universities, our public universities, our private universities, into the public sector workforce. And it's a topic that I am personally very interested in, as someone who ended up in the public sector right after college, and really found a calling for myself in this work even before going into elected office, and knowing that so many other people do the same. I think there's a lot of great things that are already happening that maybe we don't know enough about, and there are some ways that we can improve that pipeline and create more opportunities for students to see a career in government in some way, shape, or form as a great career option for themselves. It's also a great pathway into this middle class across the state. We all know the value of having a good public sector job, benefits, salaries, retirement, etc. And it really is a step up for many people who may not have that opportunity. So I'm really excited about that, and really on a more global level, at a time when still to this day it's politically vogue to attack the public sector and to attack the public workers and to blame them for all the ills in the world. This is a way for us to say, no, look, there's actually great value being created and really important work being done by public servants, whether they are city doctors, engineers, architects, teachers, clerks, custodial engineers, janitor, you name it, from the president on down to dog catcher. Everyone's a public servant, and there's a lot of dignity that comes with that title. And this is a great way for us to talk about that in a really positive way and create more opportunities for more people to be able to contribute back as they already want to. So with that, we've had a slight rejiggering of our testimony this morning. A few people that were scheduled to testify are not able to join at the last minute, which is okay. They're going to submit written testimony, and we're still waiting for the Civil Service Commissioner to join us, but we're going to go ahead and get started with our second panelist, and that is the Deputy Commissioner of Human Capital at the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services, and that is Barbara Dannenberg. I'm sorry, did you want to say anything? You guys want to say anything? RJ, do you want to say anything? Do you want to say anything? Okay. All right. Great. Deputy Commissioner, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. All right.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay for
We'll
me,
just
yes,
get you to switch that sign up for you, and then we'll get you started in 1 minute. Yeah.
Oh, this is not me.
That's not you? Yeah. Nope.
This is me.
Great. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. So good morning, Senator Gennardis and members of the State Civil Service and Pensions Committee and Higher Education Committee. Good morning, Senator Thomas and Senator Jackson. I'm Barbara Dannenberg, Deputy Commissioner for Human Capital at the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss DCAS's role in developing successful career pipelines for our municipal workforce. Our employees are the backbone of our thriving city. The breadth of services that the city offers reveals a myriad of opportunities for people seeking employment with the City of New York. This administration is committed to improving access to city employment and applauds the work of the committee to ensure that all New Yorkers have a path to civil service. Our municipal workforce is as diverse as the city we serve. People of color comprise 62% of the workforce, and women comprise 59%. We are proud of the diversity that we have achieved, and we look forward to continuing the recruitment and retention of a diverse talent pool for future generations. Looking at our workforce statistics, we've noted two key trends. First, close to 1/3 of the city's workforce is retirement eligible within the next 5 years. Second, close to 1/2 of all separations occur within an employee's first 10 years of service. Taken together, we believe we need to think thoughtfully about strengthening the employee pipeline to establish a continuous on-ramp of talent, to bring fresh and innovative ideas, At the same time, the civil service system, based on objective standards of merit and fitness, will ensure equity in job placement and career advancement for our employees. The city has long-standing programs that have developed talent pipelines, including the Public Service Corps, Urban Fellows, and many internship opportunities. Most recently, we launched a new program in January of 2019, the Civil Service Pathways Fellowship. In partnership with the City University of New York, CUNY, this 2-year fellowship pairs recent CUNY college grads with positions within city agencies and allows them to take civil service examinations after their first year of service in order to obtain permanent status. There are currently 41 fellows in this program across 2 cohorts, and we are in the midst of recruiting for the next cycle, connecting the city's future workforce with today's talent. Additionally, we are actively seeking new engagement opportunities to work with the community and educational institutions to ensure that the City of New York employs the best talent to serve this city. DCAS's Office of Citywide Recruitment, OCR, has partnered with elected officials, educational institutions, and community-based organizations to host Civil Service 101 information sessions and participate in career and resource fairs. OCR particularly focuses on communities that are underrepresented in city government, and we look forward to growing our footprint in this area. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee today, and I will now take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. What would you say the numbers, the statistics you cited? One third of the workforce is retirement eligible, 1/2 separations occur within 10 years. Have you noticed any trends in certain positions or titles or agencies where you see that higher than others? I mean, do you guys have any data on that?
Well, we certainly have data that is that tracks occupational groupings and the retention of those occupational groups. Certainly there are certain careers within the city where the workforce is getting older, such as our trades titles, for example. The other data is specific to other occupational groups.
Okay, so the trades titles is one. Is that public? Do you have that? You can share that information based on those. Are there any other agencies or any other titles where you've noticed that as well, or can you just flesh that out a little bit more?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So DCAS publishes a workforce profile report annually, and you can find data regarding different occupations, separations, median age of employees. Really, really interesting stuff in this workforce profile report, and it's published on our website amongst other places. But yeah, so within that report, you will find data concerning the different occupational groups and any trends that we're seeing over the last year as compared to the previous 10 years.
Which types of positions do you find the most difficulty recruiting for, or attracting or retaining talent in? If you can give us a snapshot from that report.
Certainly. So it's usually agency specific, I should say. I should preface that. However, we have found that certain jobs, such as the engineering professions, jobs where people need to enter city service with a lot of experience plus education, those are the harder to recruit and then also retain employees. I will also say that certain IT-related jobs are also harder to recruit. So again, anything that's more specialized, it's a little bit more difficult to recruit and retain for city positions.
And what would you attribute that to? Is it the educational or experience requirements? Is it the salary? What do you think?
I mean, it can be a combination of all of those things. Government work is for a different subset of folks than, say, people that choose to work in the private industry. You need to, for most jobs, you need to take an examination, and there's a process to hiring. But also, I feel that probably the entire package itself, and whether or not somebody is really committed to serving the public, is probably a reason.
The CUNY fellowship that you talked about, the 41 fellows, are those, where agencies are they placed in? What kind of work are they doing? Kind of give us a little bit more color on that.
So they are spread out actually across many city agencies. I think there's up to 20 that are now housing fellows, and it's certainly our goal to get a fellow in every city agency. They are across 3 career tracks. So the first track is procurement and finance, data and analysis, and policy and analysis, sorry. And then the last is data and digital services.
And you said those are across different agencies.
Correct.
Gotcha. And 41, that number, it seems that it's not an even number. How did you guys come to that number? How did that program grow, and where do you see that growing now next?
Certainly. So we began our first cohort. So we call each class of fellows a cohort, and we're currently recruiting for our 3rd cohort, which will begin in the end of June, beginning of July of this year. So the program started in January of 2019. But before that, we worked together with CUNY, with our other agency partners, in order to come up with a program that addressed a pipeline issue and also offered opportunity for recent college grads. So together with these partners, we came up with the Civil Service Pathways Fellow. We petitioned the State Civil Service Commission in order to create the title of Civil Service Pathways Fellow, and we received that approval later in 2018, so thank you to the Commission for that. And we were originally approved for 100 positions, so we can hire up to 100 fellows across the various cohorts of the fellowship. And our current 41 fellows just indicate the actual hiring line. So agencies need to fund the fellowship themselves. So what they do is they take an existing vacancy and they will convert that into a fellowship vacancy. So those 41 lines are all self-funded by our city agencies, and I think that in and of itself shows the commitment of the city and our city agencies to this program, that they're using their resources in order to fund.
Mm-hmm. And the 3 areas you talked about, those were developed how, based on student interest and what you see as kind of the needs across the city as potential areas of growth. Can you kind of just explain that process to us too?
Absolutely. So we did some research to see for entry-level jobs, what are the areas where the city has a hiring need, because a fellowship is only as good as the permanent jobs that it provides at the end of the fellowship. And from doing that research, working with agencies, we developed those 3 career tracks and match them to degree areas that CUNY offers. So the partnership started there. And most of our fellows, you'll see that they have a wide range of degree areas, but the majority of them come from finance, economics sort of background.
And those students, we don't have them here to ask, but I guess in your experience, what's driving them to want to pursue this fellowship, and what interests do they have, and what do they hope to get out of it, aside from a full-time placement and a job? Why them and why the fellowship? Do you have any insight in that?
Certainly. So, the reason why we decided to partner with CUNY is because the CUNY students, and I think that CUNY is speaking later, so they can probably speak more to this. But CUNY students actually live in the city. This is a city they grew up in for the most part. Their parents live here, and so we felt that was a good base for us to recruit for city government service. Again, serving the city that you live in. So that was definitely one of the reasons why we selected CUNY. And also the makeup of CUNY students, mirrors what the city of New York's demographics look like. So again, another wonderful place for us to, in order to have our workforce mirror what the city we serve looks like.
Thank you. I see. Kevin? RJ? Yeah.
Well, good morning, Ms. Dannenberg. Thank you for coming in, and I was very happy to hear you make the presentation about how many fellows. You're in your 2nd cohort, and in fact, I was introduced by my Chief of Staff, Joanna Garcia. We have a fellow, and I don't know if it's directly relating there. She is at John Jay, and we were introducing her to people that were part of a meeting. We had to introduce her as a fellow. She's a fellow. But when you talk about the transition from internship to Senate assistants or fellows, In fact, as my colleague indicated, the chair, that I first started in state service in 1975 under the CEDAR program. Some of you are old enough to remember that or involved in that, the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. I was hired as an assistant investigator for the state of New York, Department of Labor. I took the exam and became a permanent investigator investigating fraud for about 5 years. And my union was the New York State Public Employees Federation, in which one of our leaders and the political director will be testifying later. And so, just like my colleague, I started off in state service and continued in state service. And in fact, state service, understanding that your salaries and increases are based on negotiations that take place, but also pension and health insurance, all of these things are very important in people making a decision at where they're going to stay at and how long they're going to be there. And that's very, very important. But I wanted to ask you about, are you only talking about city agencies, or is it with elected public officials' offices, or in which the fellows are involved with?
So our program is for employment with city agencies. And again, the thought behind this program was that it would give recent college grads an opportunity for permanent civil service status. So after that first year, and we actually just hit that 1 year mark for the first cohort, the fellows are required to take a civil service examination. In January, we offered 6 separate examinations for various titles that the city utilizes, and we ensured that those fellows were, they qualified to take that exam. So I'm very happy to report that they all took an exam, and we're looking forward to, after their second year, having them roll into permanent civil service status.
And those positions that they took the exams for, those are classified positions that are represented by the various unions, I would assume.
Correct.
And if they begin there, they may go into management and be part of the leadership of an agency or department. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming in. I appreciate the opportunity to hear your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay.
What other, thank you, RJ, Senator Jackson. What other, it's so much easier when you just, how would you want to scale this program and grow this program more? And not just the program, but where do you see kind of looking down the road 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as we're facing this, retirement bubble that you alluded to? What more do you think you can be doing, and what would you advise us to help you do that better with?
So
there's a lot of questions packed in there,
yeah.
but you think it might direct.
You can remind me if I leave something out. Again, it's very early. We just hit the 1 year mark for our first cohort of the fellowship, but we absolutely envision filling all 100 positions that we are allocated for, hopefully within the next year. Taking it from there, and then again, being able to take a look back at that success once we hit the 2 year mark of our fellows actually rolling off into permanent status, just to see how, where they wind up going, what other exams they take, and of course to follow where their career path takes them. So we are very interested. We've had many conversations with CUNY about different tracks, maybe different target populations within this school in order to expand. But again, I think it's a little premature to say where exactly we would go with this, before we actually have some solid data and we actually fill those 100 positions that we can, make a thoughtful, again, this program was very thoughtfully designed, and we want to make sure that we have continued success for many years to come.
So, setting aside the program, what other recruitment efforts does the city make? Let me take a step back. What percentage of the city workforce has post-secondary credentials of some kind? And what percentage of the city workforce or positions do you think need some type of post-secondary credential of some kind?
So to answer your first question, we don't actually track, employees educational level. Obviously, many city jobs have a baccalaureate degree as a minimum qualification requirement. However, employees are able to self-report within our personnel system what their level of education actually is, and somewhere around 45% of our employees are self-reporting that they have a baccalaureate degree or higher. But again, this is not something that not data that we collect, but moving forward, certainly something for us to take a look at and maintain interest in. And then to answer your second question, again, the city's career trajectories cover, you name it, we have a job. So, and not every job is geared towards higher education. So, definitely I think that we will continue to maintain a very thoughtful approach to filling our jobs, and certainly, positions that require that higher level of education, will be seeking to recruit folks from local schools and, schools that maybe specialize in certain areas that will help the city. And then again, also target the rest of the population of skilled work that the city needs in order to run effectively.
Great. You were starting to go where I wanted to take the line of questioning. One of the things as we were preparing for this hearing, one of the things we heard from a lot of people was that in some ways this pipeline needs to start at the high school level, because a lot of positions come from right out of high school. Or maybe an associate's education, and maybe the need for more apprenticeship programs at the high school level to come into some city positions. So that's one area that I think merits a lot more exploration, maybe in a subsequent inquiry. What outreach efforts and recruitment efforts do you currently do on college campuses across the city, CUNY and otherwise?
So I mentioned our Office of Citywide Recruitment, the DCAS office. They will go out and they will host between 2 and 3 job fairs per month, and they will host between 2 and 3 information sessions per month with local colleges and universities, not just CUNY schools, but NYU, St. John's, other schools as well, and then also other community groups. So not necessarily always at the college level, but they try to get out there. They're out there every week, putting information out and doing targeted recruitment. So if the city has an exam open for filing, they will, and taking applications, our Office of Citywide Recruitment will go out and, seek those populations that qualify for those jobs and let them know, hey, we have these jobs, and by the way, this is what civil service is. And just give them a little bit of information, because again, government service is a little bit different than, private industry jobs. So just to give them that understanding and background.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Any other?
So with respects to your first and second cohort, what is the diversity factor in the cohort as far as male, female, people of color? What is the diversity cohort?
So
in number 1 and number 2, since you're already in your second cohort.
And luckily, I have those statistics with me.
How many did you have individual fellows in the first cohort?
So the first cohort was 17.
17. Okay.
And then we grew to 24 with the second cohort.
Okay.
And of course, we're looking to grow again for this third cohort.
Okay.
But both cohorts were split, fairly evenly, 50-50 between male, female, and they are quite diverse. The vast majority are non-white. And for both cohorts, actually, I'm looking at these numbers. So we're looking at between 35 and 40% Asian Pacific Islander, 13% non-Hispanic Black, 13% Hispanic, and whites, non-Hispanic, between 4 and 10%. So a very nice overview of what the city demographics actually look like.
Were these self-identifying
Yes.
themselves?
Yes.
Okay. And now, you indicated that the name of this program is a Pathways Fellowship. How much are fellows paid in their first year before they actually take an exam and then are employed by the agency or department?
So the starting salary for a fellow is $42,000, and that also includes health benefits. obviously entry into the pension, and vacation time, the full. So fellows are city employees, and they receive the full range of benefits of city employees. We're very proud of that.
And the fellows, Pathway Fellowships, you're in the second cohort right now, starting the process for the third.
Right.
What is the overall cost factor of the Pathwords Fellowship as far as each year, or for the trial period, whether it's 5 years or 10 years? What's the cost factor?
So again, that's something that we're looking at, long range. The city started this program about a year ago, and it is all self-funded. So DCAS
It is all what?
is self-funded.
By DCAS?
DCAS and our partner agencies. So the agencies provide the vacancy or the personnel line to hire a fellow or multiple fellows. And DCAS runs the program through our utilizing our current resources within our Learning and Development Bureau. So currently we are, we're using our, using our resources to the best of our ability, and, definitely looking towards if there is an expansion in the future, what that would look like as far as necessary resources.
Is this being looked at as a permanent pathway, or is it for a certain period of time as far as envisioned?
We are envisioning this program, definitely outlasting me and my city tenure. This is something that, again, that we've all partnered together to put together, and we think that, and based on just the immediate success of the program, over 300 people applied for spots the first time around. So clearly, this is an area where we really need to tap into those resources. So we're definitely looking for this program to be long-term.
And obviously you're tracking everything so that you
Right.
can put out a report later on about all of the information on that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We're very proud of this program, and we're very fortunate that we're able to track it from its inception.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kevin?
Thank you, Commissioner, for coming in and leading such a wonderful program. I'm chair of Consumer Protection, and I have a specific focus on student loans and how much students are burdened by it, like once they graduate. So the fellows that you do give a job to, do you have any stats on how much they are burdened by student loan debt, by any chance?
I do not, but that would be something that would be interesting to know.
And do you offer any sort of, not you personally, but the agency, any sort of incentive for employees? Like if you were to stay with the city agency for X amount of years, that X part of their student loan would be forgiven or paid? Is there any sort of program like that?
So currently there is no program specifically from the city, but as you know, there is a federal loan forgiveness program for folks who engage in certain type of government work.
Yes.
So of course that does apply to some of these fellows moving forward, but no, not at this time.
Do you offer employees any sort of tuition assistance? Like, for example, they come in with a bachelor degree, they want to go to school while they're working. Do you offer any sort of tuition assistance if they do go to school while they're working?
Certainly. So the city does have several scholarship programs for current city employees or children of city employees. And also our labor partners have several different programs for their members as far as tuition reimbursement. They also have partnerships with CUNY and other local colleges where their members get a severe discount for certain coursework that they do. So the city does have several different programs for that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. As someone who is in the federal public service program but has no expectation of ever being able to benefit from it, I will echo and amplify Senator Thomas's inquiry and concerns over that. It's a problem, and actually we're going to be doing another event on that issue specifically in the future, really thinking about how many people in New York are enrolled in the program who are working in public service, whether civil service or in the nonprofit sector, and for lack of a better term, are getting screwed by the failures of the federal program, because many people are. The 3% approval rate nationwide, it's dismal. But thank you very, very much for your testimony, and I greatly appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We are now going to go back, take a step back, and I believe we've been joined by the Acting Commissioner of the New York State Civil Service Department, Lola Brabham. Brabham, sorry. Yeah. Good morning, Commissioner. How are you?
Morning. Fantastic.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Good morning, Chair Ganados and distinguished members of the State Senate Civil Service and Pensions Committee. My name is Lola Brabham, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Acting Commissioner for the New York State Department of Civil Service. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. As the central personnel agency for state government, the Department of Civil Service is responsible for the administration of the Civil Service Merit System, serving approximately 150,000 employees. In this capacity, the department classifies and allocates positions, develops and administers and scores civil service examinations, establishes and maintains eligible lists, and provides policy advice and assistance with respect to personnel recruitment and placement, diversity efforts, and workforce restructuring. Similar services and other technical assistance are also provided to the 94 municipal agencies that are responsible for 360,000 local government employees. In addition, the department is pleased to administer the New York State's Student Intern Program. The Student Intern Program is part of Governor Cuomo's new New York Leaders Initiative, which focuses on attracting new and highly skilled individuals to state government through both internship and fellowship programs. Through this program, New York State is preparing both undergraduate and graduate students for future public service opportunities by providing them with valuable hands-on program experience that will assist them as they begin their professional careers. As you know, employees are essential to the success of government, and the Department of Civil Service is proud to play a lead role in providing the diverse talent that agencies need to provide critical services to New York's residents and customers. In state government, appointments and promotions are made according to the principles of merit and fitness, as mandated by the New York State Constitution. And since the state's workforce is overwhelmingly competitive, civil service examinations are the key mechanism used to fill most entry-level and promotional job opportunities. State agencies and localities rely on the department for consistent and timely civil service exams to ensure they can meet their staffing needs and effectively perform their core functions. To that end, the department is taking proactive measures to further streamline the examination process through the use of technology and business improvements so that our agency partners continue to have a pipeline of talent available to meet their hiring needs when they need it. Through the Professional Careers and Opportunities exam, the department is also attracting new talent to the state's workforce by providing them with the unique opportunity to gain access to a number of rewarding and meaningful careers within New York State. The PCO exam is one civil service exam that is used by state agencies to fill more than 100 different jobs, types of jobs, across a wide range of disciplines, including health and human services, environmental conservation, and transportation, just to name a few. In 2017, the PCO exam was expanded to include college juniors and seniors and was held at local universities for the first time, including select SUNY and CUNY campuses, to complement the department's larger strategic efforts to expand testing venues and reach a more diverse talent pool. I'm pleased to report that more than 3,000 job seekers have been hired into positions across various state agencies since the launch of the PCO exam in 2014. In addition, the success of the PCO exam program has laid the foundation for the exploration and potential use of other innovative testing initiatives moving forward. The department has also expanded its effort to promote the many employment opportunities available throughout the state government. Over the past year, the department participated in more than 250 outreach and recruitment events, connecting with more than 26,000 job seekers at universities, community organizations, and job fairs. These outreach efforts complement the more targeted recruitment efforts of state agencies seeking specific needs and skill sets to meet their workforce needs. Furthermore, the department has implemented new strategic outreach and marketing initiatives, from the development of a new user-friendly public website to enhanced social media efforts designed to brand New York State as an employer of choice and create greater awareness of the civil service exam process. At the same time, the department is actively engaged in enhancing exam preparation materials and resources to further encourage participation in civil service exams and better prepare exam takers for future success. The initiatives I've highlighted today underscore the department's ongoing commitment to supporting high-priority workforce needs while promoting equal opportunity and access for all New Yorkers. Our workforce is strongest when everyone is able to participate, and ensuring that our state government remains able to attract, hire, and retain a diverse talent pool is key to our current and future success. I look forward to working with you to advance a shared vision for a top-tier workforce to deliver critical services to the state of New York. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today.
Thank you very much. Want to start kind of piggybacking off some of the questions, some of the information we just heard from the city. Do you have a sense as to what percentage of our current state workforce is retirement eligible within the next 5 and let's say 10 years?
Yes, it's about 20%.
20%?
Yes.
That's 5 years or 10
In the
years?
next 5 years.
Next 5 years.
Yes.
And do we know how much, what percentage of our workforce does not stay longer than let's say 5 or 10 years?
The average is around 14 years.
14 years.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you explain the PCO exam? How is that different from the regular civil service examination process? Can you just flesh that out a little bit more?
Sure. A regular civil service exam is for one specific title, right? So if you're an engineer, you want to take the job for the engineer. When you take the exam, you're only being considered for positions that become available in the engineering title. The PCO exam is one exam that covers over 100 different titles.
Okay.
So once you take the exam, you're scored, ranked, put on the eligible list. You are then eligible for consideration in any of those 100 plus titles.
Gotcha. And you mentioned the state internship program. Has there ever been any consideration or development of a similar fellowship program that the city just got permission to do from the commission? Has there ever been any? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Well, we do have the New York Leaders program, which is really a three-pronged program.
Okay.
So there are the student interns, and we oversee that and kind of do the matching between the interns and the state agencies. However, the administration also has the Empire Fellows program and the Excelsior Fellows program, and those programs are overseen by the Department of State.
Okay. Can you? Okay. We'll follow up on that. So the intern program, how?
The intern program is an undergraduate
Okay.
intern program. Individuals go onto the website. They're able to see the various internships that are available throughout the state. Some are paid, some are not paid. They're able to upload their resumes and effectively make a match between their interest and the employer is doing the same thing. And the individual agencies are actually going in and hiring the interns that fit their workforce needs.
So how is that promoted and marketed? Is that done by the individual agencies? Is that done by your department?
It is promoted and marketed by individual agencies. We also, we never miss an opportunity to talk about it when we go out and do our recruitment events. We highlight it prominently on our website. We go out to colleges and universities and talk about it. We're often invited to come on to SUNY campuses, some CUNY as well, and private colleges, and we highlight that as a program that's offered by the state.
What would you say the greatest recruitment needs are for the state workforce as you currently see it today?
Probably the more difficult to fill titles, which fall into the engineering sector, also in the medical professions, nurses, doctors, the difficult to fill recruit for titles.
Okay. Senator, do you have any?
Thank you, Commissioner, for joining us today. With those difficult to fill positions, what are you doing to attract the talent?
Yeah. So we do a targeted recruitment for those positions where we've drafted materials that speak specifically to those jobs as opposed to just, come and work for the state. So we try to make sure that we focus on those when individuals go out and do recruitment. But we also have some other tools at our disposal through our Office of Classification and Compensation. There's sometimes the ability for agencies to request a salary differential based on recruitment difficulty. So if they've been recruiting, they're getting no one. We will do some analysis, some market analysis, and say, okay, if we're able to increase the starting salary for these individuals, will this be a way to bring them in the door? That can work for an entire title, or it may be just for the individual who's coming into the job. They may have a PhD, they may have a wealth of experience over and above what's required, and this would be a way to bring them into state government. Agencies can also request to provide a salary differential for that individual as a way to recruit them into state government.
How often does that happen?
It's not something that happens a lot. It's a tool that is available. It's not a regular thing that we do, but it is a tool that's available.
I would be correct when I say the salary in the private sector is a lot higher for nurses and for engineers than in the state agencies.
And probably for many jobs.
Right.
Or most jobs.
So,
yeah.
I mean, one of the points of this hearing is to try and figure out, if we are not offering top salaries, what can we balance out to still retain the top? I mean, I talked about this with the last witness that we had as well, student loans.
Yes.
A lot of them coming out of school, if we had a program that would be able to pay part of their student loan if they stayed with an agency for X amount of years, I think we can recruit some top talent in the state for our agencies versus them going to Google or working for a private hospital.
Yeah.
That's just my tidbit.
Right. Well, I mean, I can't dispute that, and I'm sure you're right about that. But I would say, unlike the private sector who can do whatever they want to do with their money, we have to balance the taxpayer dollar, right? And so while we'd like to be able to, offer tuition assistance or loan forgiveness for everyone, that's not something that we have right now. So working within the parameters that we do have, we're trying to be more creative and really understand the types of things that people are looking for when they're deciding where to go to work. And you mentioned places like Google and Amazon and places like that, and they're able to, perhaps offer flexible work schedules and flexible work environments and all of that. And that's something that we believe, that we can do. In fact, there are a number of efforts underway right now to look at, and there are some pilots underway to look at the state offering the ability telework, where you're not, actually your work site is wherever you happen to be, and doing that for a number of days. Flexible work arrangements in terms of what time the workday starts and ends. Things like that, mentorships, just things that make people feel that there is a path forward with the work that they're doing. So there are a number of pilots underway right now, and things that we're doing that don't necessarily cost money that we hope will make the workplace, more attractive. I know that doesn't replace, the other types of monetary incentives, but right now, we're not there.
What's your annual budget? at the
At the
agency?
Department of
Yeah,
Civil Service,
yeah.
about $58 million.
58 million. How much more do you think you would need for
A whole lot more than
that? I guess that's for a different hearing.
Yeah, yes.
But thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Senator Jackson?
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
How long have you been acting? How come you don't have the permanent title of commissioner?
Well, that's going to be up to you all very soon. So,
I thought it was up to the governor to make the recommendation.
well, the governor has made the recommendation.
He has?
Yes, he has, sir.
Then we should deal with it soon. How long have
Okay.
you been in civil service? The Department of Civil Service?
I came to the Department of Civil Service in 2015.
Okay, very good. So I heard your response to my colleague with respects to titles that are the most difficult to recruit.
Yes.
And all of the ones that you mentioned are in the PS&T unit, which is represented by PEF.
Yes.
And I know that there are certain limitations within the Department of Civil Service, but as you know, reclassifications or reallocations are the appropriate avenues to pursue. And obviously, I've, as a former employee of PEF for 23 years, I know where titles are very hard to recruit, and you can bring them in at a higher level. But I just think that where you have hard to recruit titles, it'd be more appropriate to reallocate those titles to a higher level, so that you're paying individuals to compete with the outside agencies, departments, private sector. So reallocations to higher levels, you probably would be able to recruit more overall.
Right.
And especially like nurses and doctors and others that are in the
Right, and it is
engineers.
sometimes the case that because part of the core business that we do is to analyze the state titles and make sure that those jobs remain relevant, not only with regard to the salary but also the duties and responsibilities of the job. And we often do go out and look at titles, and sometimes they are reallocated, and sometimes the reallocation is an upward reallocation, and in very limited instances it might be a downward reallocation, but that is something that we do.
Sure. And one of the, I just wrote this down.
Sure.
What is the average cost for an individual in a PS&T unit to take a professional exam for whatever title?
Yeah, most
average.
Probably about $30, no more than, I think the highest I've ever seen is maybe $40 for an exam.
Okay. So one of the things I wrote down as far as, is there a waiver, for example,
There
of
is.
of certain titles that are hard to recruit, and do you have people in the unit, in the titles may below that, and if the other titles are hard to recruit, just giving them a waiver so they can take the exam?
Yeah, not all promotional exams have, so some promotional exams there is no fee to take the exam.
Okay.
So people don't have to worry about that. There is the ability for individuals to ask for a waiver from the exam for various reasons, right? Whether it's that you can't afford it, or you are not working, you're receiving unemployment, you're receiving public assistance, you're a veteran. We've waived those fees for all honorably discharged veterans. So there are fee waivers available, and one thing about that is that the fee waiver was always available, but what I found is that it wasn't always prominently displayed on the part of the application where someone would see it. A lot of people, years ago, it was back on page 4 when it should really be at the top of page 1, and so we've made some changes around that, and we make sure that we go out and talk about it and try to make sure that people are aware of that.
Have you ever considered having a dialogue or communication, and maybe you have, with the PS&T unit, the president of PEF, and their top staff regarding those hard to recruit titles? I mean, so that you can actually hear from people on the ground in those titles, and those that are hard to recruit titles?
Yes, we do have dialogues. In fact, I think we have one coming up soon. But sometimes when there are issues, as you know, PEF is not shy about reaching out and letting their position, go on record. But over the past several years, we've met with the president of PEF, along with his team, on a number of occasions to try to get a better understanding around some complex issues, and we'll continue to do that. I think it's important. So, we will continue on that. We're already on that path, and we'll stay on it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
What, if any, barriers do you see in terms of recruiting more individuals to come join the state workforce? Aside from the hard to fill titles that we talked about, are there any structural barriers that you see that exist for the recruitment purpose?
There are, structural barriers, particularly when you talk about millennials and college students, and it's not just the millennials and college students, but
We
we'll
can blame
focus
them,
on them
yeah.
because they have a different expectation, right, for work. So most people don't expect that you're going to go out and you're going to take an exam and we may call you next year for the job, because you're looking for the job now, right? And most people can't wait a year until maybe you're finally reachable on the eligible list or something like that. So we do see that as a barrier to bringing, onboarding people quickly. And that's something that we struggle with. One of the other barriers that I see is even for individuals who are currently working within the state, barriers exist, such as, well, I've taken this exam, but I have to be hired off the interdepartmental list. I can't be considered at another agency, and those kinds of things, because it impacts career mobility and an individual's ability to say, well, that promotion's not available here at my agency, but I see that they need, someone in this same position for the promotion that I'm going for over at another agency, but right now it's not as flexible as it probably could be to allow people to, move back and forth to different agencies. And I see that as a barrier as well, because particularly, number one, trying to understand all of this when you're coming into the state workforce, and just the speed at which any of this stuff can happen.
Sure. Okay. Great. Thank you. I think it's funny. I was having a conversation with someone earlier this week who I met, and he spent 20 years working for the state. And he started because he saw a flyer in his graduate school program office, and he needed a job. He got a master's degree. He got a job, and he said, I'll apply. What the hell? Why not? He ended up spending 20 years of his career with the state workforce up in Albany. And it strikes me in some ways it's so simple. It's just like having that one spark, but in other ways it can be really difficult. Where else, or how else do you think we can be actively promoting and recruiting and marketing to college graduates, or even non-college graduates, for some of these positions? And how much, what do you think the capacity or bandwidth is to kind of do more, to have more of those sparks of inspiration that say, oh, look, I never thought about working for OCFS, and here we go, and whatever? I
think one of the things that I've been talking about, and what we're trying to do at Civil Service, is really be more in tune with, kind of what are the cutting edge jobs that people are interested in now. Go out, we need to learn all about cybersecurity jobs and about the technology jobs, and really be able to kind of speak that language, so that when we go out, we can talk to people about kind of jobs in emerging fields, and how do we bridge that gap between the private sector and the public sector. Because when I think young people, when they think about coming to work for the state, they don't think that we have the cutting edge jobs that the private sector does, but we do. We may talk about them differently, kind of using that kind of like bureaucratic kind of language, and I think that's something we've been working on at Civil Service. Like, make it simple and just explain to people what this job is, what it can set you up for in the future, because I find, even myself, sometimes when you look at some of the materials, you say, okay, but you don't really understand what path is this setting me on, right? And so I think we can do probably a better job of explaining that, and modernizing the way we talk about these jobs, and the benefit of working for the state, and really branding and marketing the state as an employer of choice, so that we can compete with the private sector. Sure.
And kind of the last question I have, I want to piggyback off of Senator Thomas's questions about student debt. we spend a lot of, and your point's well taken about protecting taxpayer dollars. Obviously, these are all public dollars. We spend a lot, city, state, wherever, on rental subsidies because someone fell behind, and we want to make sure they don't fall into a deep hole. We, the city just launched a new child support subsidy. We don't want people to fall behind in a hole.
Right.
But student debt is that next hole. I mean, that's the hole that people are going to find impossible to dig themselves out of. And, it's a generational crisis that hasn't peaked yet, but is very well. I mean, we all see the cliff, and we're all, hurtling towards it. What do you think, if we found a way to provide more student loan support for our civil workforce, our public workforce, or create, we have the Excelsior Scholarship Program, if that was tied to working in, the public sector, if you give the state 10 years of your career, we'll give you a debt-free, we'll pay your student loans back, we'll give you forgiveness. Any thoughts on structuring a program like that, and what do you think the
my thought would
bandwidth is?
be it certainly would be a great recruitment tool, right? Because who doesn't want to have loan forgiveness or assistance with paying student loans? So that certainly would be another tool in the toolbox for going out and recruiting individuals to come and work for the state.
And you think, based on the conversations and the experience you have on the ground, people would find that an attractive? I mean, are we hearing that, or is it just anecdotal? Or do we think that that's actually a barrier we face right now with the inability to be competitive on that particular point?
I don't know that we hear that when we go out and do recruitment, but I would say that, we can assume that is something people would want. I don't know that we have people coming in and say, well, I would take this job with the state, except you don't have, loan forgiveness, so I'm not able to take it. I don't think we hear that a lot. So I don't think I can comment on that.
And and the last question I have, does the department track at all the educational attainment of the state workforce and where they receive their education from?
We don't track that, but coincidentally, we are working on a new human resource management system that we're trying to put in place for the state, and with some of the new tools that are available with the software today, that's something in the future we will be able to track. So we were just talking about that the other day, and I think it's important. It would be great to know how many of our students are coming from private colleges and universities or public colleges and universities, and what level of education we have. Right now there are certain positions that do require, part of the minimum qualification is that you have a bachelor's degree or something like that. So, I think the information is knowable, but that's not something that we track right now for reporting purposes.
One of the, and I'll let you go right after this, one of the inspirations for this hearing in the first place was, and we're not going to be hearing from the CUNY folks, which is why I'm mentioning the story, they had to, scheduling conflict. Something like half of all New York City school teachers come from the CUNY system, which to me is a staggering and really impressive statistic. And that's something that I think is phenomenal. Right, and of course there are teachers that come from the non-CUNY schools as well. But that seems to be like something obviously is working in that connection.
Right.
And I think if we can understand that dynamic better, however it started or however we got to that point, I think it's really interesting to explore. And there must be other stats like that are out there for specific positions or titles or career pathways or agencies or things that'll help us understand this larger question a lot better. So I would definitely encourage, as you're developing this new human resources program, to think about what insights we can glean from collecting that type of data, because the number surprised me in some ways, but in some ways it wasn't surprising, right? I just thinking about my own experience as a graduate of CUNY, how many of my classmates ended up becoming teachers or whatever. I think we can probably glean a lot of information from that type of data collection. So I would encourage you to consider that. One more comment?
Yes.
So, while I was listening to my colleagues, and it came to my mind, and I wanted to mention to you as a commissioner for Department of Civil Service, there's one thing that when people look at the entire package of benefits, salary, health insurance, pension, Tier 6 is terrible. Let me say it again. Tier 6 is terrible.
Well, luckily we're not responsible for
but
that.
I'm just saying, you're the commissioner.
Yes.
When you talk about hard to recruit,
Yeah.
People look at the entire package. Tier 6, again, is terrible. It needs to be changed.
Okay,
I'd say that to you loud and
We will pass
clear.
that on to the Office of the State Comptroller.
Okay.
Okay.
Tier 6 is terrible. Thank you.
Amen. All right. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving right along, our next. Okay, our next panel is the Suffolk County Executive, Steve Bellone, and the Suffolk County Acting Personnel Director, Tom Melito. Good morning. Good to see you. Good morning.
Morning, Senator.
Are you ready?
Thank you, Senator Guarnaris, members of the committee, senators. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today. I'm joined, as you mentioned, by the Suffolk County Acting Civil Service Director, Tom Melito. While I'll speak more broadly about the Civil Service Office's negative impacts on the operations of county government, the acting director will discuss specific recommendations designed to enhance the value the office brings to the organization. I want to make clear that my comments here today in no way reflect upon the frontline employees in the Civil Service Office, who are overwhelmingly hardworking and dedicated public servants. Suffolk County Department of Human Resources personnel and civil service is central to our efforts to achieve excellence in this government because of its role in recruitment and human resource management. Civil Service Office controls hiring for county government and oversees hiring for local governments throughout Suffolk. In Suffolk County, the Civil Service Office is also charged with providing a centralized human resources management function. In 2012, I came into a county government that was broken and dysfunctional. I initially assumed this was caused primarily by mismanagement. I was wrong. Over time, I came to understand that there was a corrupt operation in Suffolk County government whose primary purpose was self-preservation. This corruption, centered in the district attorney's office under the former leadership, has had a crippling effect on the operations and effectiveness of this government by protecting a broken status quo. Nearly 4 years ago, I stood on the steps of the former district attorney's office and called on him to step down for running a criminal enterprise out of his office. It was 18 months later when the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District indicted the former district attorney, who was found guilty of corruption and abuse of power this past December. This corruption helped to protect a related cronyism that we encountered in the leadership of the Civil Service Office, which is why just last year we fought another battle to remove the entrenched head of that office, who had held the post for 38 years. In seeking reappointment to another 6-year term, this individual argued that I had to reappoint him because he was the only person on Long Island who met the qualifications for the position. Qualifications that he himself had drafted and implemented years earlier. He mused that there might be one individual from upstate New York who could qualify, but then expressed doubt that this individual would have any interest in moving to Long Island. The notion that no one else could qualify for such a position in the largest county in the state of New York is, of course, absurd on its face. It was important, though, for him and others that he continue to be in a position to wield the power of the Civil Service Office, to dole out favors that in turn helped him to retain power. Despite some extreme efforts to keep this individual in power, we were ultimately successful in making a change. Following his removal, I appointed an acting director who led a review of the state of the office in coordination with our Director of Performance Management and Deputy County Executive Melito. The report, which was produced at the end of this review and released last December, made two critical findings. First, it highlighted an almost complete lack of diversity in the office, with just one person of color among 77 employees within the department. And I think it's also relevant to note that most of those 77 employees were women, though over 70, though the top leadership of the office was overwhelmingly male. Second, the report cited this report the complete absence of a centralized human resources function within the department. A department that literally has the title Human Resources in its title had no HR director. This report laid out in stark detail what had been clear to me for some time, that the Department of Civil Service must be reformed in order for us to attract, retain, and empower talent in the workforce to create a culture of innovation and diversity that will allow this government to reach its full potential. As you are fully aware here, this is not an academic exercise. Everything that we do in this government has a real impact on the lives of the 1.5 million residents in Suffolk County. To the extent then that this government, or any government, is not operating as effectively and efficiently as possible, we are causing real harm and damage to the people and the communities that we serve. Because of the culture of corruption that we confronted and the battles we have won, we now have the ability to accelerate reform in this government, but the task ahead is enormous. We are just now in a position to implement basic pillars that are necessary for any large organization to function effectively. We have more than 500 data systems that do not communicate with each other. We have no centralized human resources function to help identify and nurture talent within the organization and to create accountability structures that help to enhance performance. There's no centralized training unit or division that can work with departments and employees to advance their skills, increasing the proficiency and versatility of the organization. We lack basic systems in this government, like a modern payroll system or procurement system. All of these deficiencies directly relate to and have been impacted by the failures of the Civil Service Office and its leadership. Let me cite just one example. It took nearly 2 years for my administration to convince the Civil Service Office that we needed new titles, to bring in the specific talent necessary to transform our IT infrastructure to help create accountability and transparency within this government. After securing the titles, finally, the first person hired in the new title to help lead an IT transformation in this government was eventually forced out of the title because she wasn't reachable on the written exam that she was required to take. In other words, she didn't score in the top 3 on an exam that was not an effective measure of who had the right combination of skills and qualities to do that job. So we went back to civil service to push for the title to allow for a time and experience exam to provide slightly more flexibility in identifying the talent necessary to do this critical work. Since my reelection this past November, we have now been recruiting talented individuals to fill these titles and to do this essential work, but we still face civil service challenges with respect to these titles. The result of all this has been delays preventing this government from implementing critical reforms and improvements. I cannot emphasize enough, as you know, the import of the Civil Service Office to the operations of government. Reform is essential, and we are doing this on the local level, but we cannot do this alone, which is why I'm grateful that you're holding this hearing today. We need our partners in the state legislature to review civil service laws and regulations to identify those that inhibit effective organization management and to work with us to create positive change. I want to thank you again, thank this committee, Mr. Chairman and Senators, for working with us to providing this opportunity, and again, working with us on how best to recruit talented individuals into our workforce and to support their healthy growth and development within the organization. I look forward to working with members of this committee to achieve these goals. Thank you. Tom.
Mr. Melito?
So good morning. My name is Thomas Melito, and I'm the Acting Personnel Officer for Suffolk County. I also want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak before you today. For the last 8 years, I held the position of Deputy County Executive in Suffolk County, and as of January 3rd, I was appointed to this position that I'm in now. Thank you to County Executive Steve Ballone. A most critical aspect in achieving the mission of governmental excellence revolves around the appropriate and strategic management of the organization's talent base, the county's most precious and expensive resource, and this starts with recruitment. A fundamental challenge, once employees have been recruited, is to combine the practice of management with finding ways to keep public employees engaged, motivated, challenged, and committed. And this, in my view, requires an interplay between civil service and local human capital management practices. The work of government has changed dramatically over the last 20 years, adding complexity to workforce management. Civil service and its member municipalities both need to more fully understand these complexities, take them into account, plan for and put strategies in place to position our organizations most favorably within the context of governmental mission, an understanding of required employee attributes, and the requirements of the labor market we all depend on. We agree wholeheartedly with the need to attract highly skilled new college graduates. And actually, some of my comments are going to touch upon things that have been discussed today. We propose creation of a new job classification targeted specifically to new college grads. These positions would require no initial written test with perhaps a 2-year term. Candidates could be recruited and placed within the organization by study area, such as management, technology, science, accounting, etc. And to increase the chances of retention, we also propose creating mentorship programs to usher graduates through the process of acclimating to the organization and forming relationships that are long-term, lasting, and very helpful and valuable. Similarly, we would like greater flexibility in hiring senior management, leadership, and executive titles. Political turnover in government is straining the ability at all levels to retain the type of knowledge-based, experientially seasoned management capabilities needed to support the long-term health of our public organizations. Like with new college graduates, we believe that a new classification of senior executive could provide such flexibility. We'd like to consider other ideas that might be a little more out there, but we'd like to talk about expanding the top selectable candidates to include those in the top 3 scoring bands, to allow for greater flexibility in identifying talent and making hiring decisions. This would provide an ability to evaluate other qualitative attributes in new hires and those up for promotion, such as professionalism, experience, past performance, education, professional experience, maturity, and creativity. In short, our public institutions require an effective partnership to include civil service and local human capital management that allows public organizations greater flexibility to attract and retain competent, high-quality candidates to public service, while providing a work-life experience that reflects the needs of the broader labor market that we're all reading about today, and rewards high performance and develops and utilizes top-notch leadership at all levels. A stronger partnership between New York State and the municipalities it serves could operate as a true shared service in accord with human capital management set of policies designed to create access to the labor markets and support municipalities when competing for, recruiting, investing in, and retaining talent. This could start by allowing municipalities to file human capital management plans with state civil service. Once reviewed and approved by New York State as to the due diligence exhibited in the plan, grant additional flexibilities in making decisions as discussed above. We would certainly appreciate an opportunity, as County Executive Bellone has stated, to continue a formal dialogue with New York State Civil Service and the municipalities across the state to more fully vet some of these ideas and develop proposals for others. In short, we in the public sector are losing the natural advantages that we had. As Senator Jackson noted, Tier 6 is terrible. Our benefits are now not that much better than the benefits associated with private sector firms. Our pensions are less beneficial, as we said. We need to capitalize on the intrinsic and more meaningful attributes of working in the public sector. What brings people to the public sector is not necessarily dollars. You do need to have some relationship between the real world and what we pay, but frankly, we have to make our organizations more attractive for people to come and work. The younger people coming into the workforce today, we're finding, are very much influenced by perceived opportunities for growth over time, connections to the organization, and just career path that gives them an opportunity to do something that's meaningful, and better for society. And those are the things I believe we need to work together to capitalize on if we're going to compete at all with people in the private sector. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Chair.
much. And thank you very much, both of you, for your testimony. I did a tour earlier this fall of different civil service across the state. I went to Nassau County, Suffolk County, Syracuse, Buffalo, etc., and I had a chance to meet with some of your county workers in the social services department. And to your point, County Executive, they wanted to be there doing good work, and I asked every single one, why are you here? And they said, I'm here because I'm helping someone avoid homelessness. I'm here because it's a point, echoing what I started this hearing by saying, we don't spend enough time and effort, we don't use enough words to elevate the dignity of the work that people are doing in the public sector. And when someone feels that their mission to come to work every day is to help someone else avoid homelessness, well, that's something that we should be celebrating, right, and elevating and giving more positive focus to.
That's right. Senator, I couldn't agree more, and I think it speaks to the importance. There is not one job that we do in government that is not in some way impacting people's lives. And that is why, for me, it is so important that we do everything we can to make sure the government is operating as effectively as possible. And my experience, both formally as a town supervisor and certainly as county executive, has given me a real insight into how important civil service is in that role. People come into government because they do want to serve. They care. That's the main reason most people come into the government, is because they want to serve. They have something inside them that is about service. But we need to make sure that we have systems in place in government that once they're there as well, once we've recruited that talent, which is absolutely critical, that once they're there, that it nurtures that talent and it helps it grow and it puts it in an environment that is enriching and fulfilling that desire to serve. And civil service plays a big role in that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can you give us a sense, kind of echoing off the other question we've asked the previous two panelists, give us a snapshot of your workforce. What percentage of your workforce today in the county is retirement eligible, let's say now in the next 5 years? And what's the average tenure of a county worker?
So in terms of it varies by agency, as was noted earlier, but anywhere between 40 to 50% of our workforce, depending on which area you're in, are eligible probably to retire over the next 5 years. With that is an issue. Retention in terms of what their stay is, I can't tell you. I don't have that, but I can tell you we have lots of older workers who have been around a long time and are getting eligible to retire. So that's definitely an issue. And we're having lots of issues associated with getting younger people to be interested in coming in and taking those places.
Can you, knowing that you don't have everything in front of you, do you have any sense of where the bulk of those workers are? Is it clustered in certain types of positions or agencies, or is it really spread across the board with a little bit of variance?
Quite frankly, it's spread pretty much across the board. In our public safety areas, it's probably about 30%. In the technology area, it's higher. The technology world is changing so dramatically, even in the last 2 to 3 years, with the advent of new business intelligence types of tools, etc., that the skill sets that people have in the department, back to the COBOL and Fortran days. And so those people there's no longer opportunities for them to do the work that they've been doing. Steve mentioned that we're creating a new payroll, personnel, and human capital management system. We're going to bring that in. The old system was built in 1988. It's written in COBOL. Nobody uses COBOL anymore. And so we had like 5 or 6 people. Yeah, we do. So in technology, it's dramatically changing. And I would say pretty much straight across the board. We do have a lot of people that are long tenured in the county that are approaching retirement.
And the way that you're trying to fill or attract new people to fill those positions that are being vacated, or your efforts. Can you talk a little bit more about your efforts to recruit, kind of that next generation of county worker? What are you currently doing to recruit, attract, market, make government sexy again type of stuff? What are you guys doing right now, and how will we?
Let me just say, one of the challenges we faced, Senator, is the lack of a centralized human resources function, which is one of the problems that I talked about. And it's been one of the more frustrating things for me, the inability to have that organized recruitment effort. So we are literally building that human resources function now in this new civil service office. So some of the techniques, and the Deputy County Executive is going through his confirmation process right now, actually.
Yes.
But he can talk a little bit about some of those things.
Yeah, so we do some of the normal things I'm finding, and again, I've been in the office 6 weeks, but we do probably 30 to 50 events a year going out to colleges, high schools, mostly people asking us to come in rather than us proactively going out and doing that. In addition, as County Executive Malone said, we've also created a diversity and inclusion operation. We're starting it right now. We've hired a person to do that, and we are developing plans to go out and be much more proactive, both in terms of diversity and inclusion and getting people to understand what civil service is all about.
I think for our particular situation, it is important that we are actively, and I want the Civil Service Office to actually be going out into underrepresented communities in our government. So they're going to the places where people are to actively recruit those individuals. And I think that is the most effective way that we can increase the talent and the effectiveness of the government is to more directly be appealing to that diverse talent pool that we have within the county.
Yeah. Thank you, County Executive Malone and Director Melito, for being here. Want to commend the County Executive for fighting corruption on Suffolk County and basically making it more livable for people on Long Island. Thank you to both of you. My question is, we heard from other witnesses here about the programs where they have internships and fellowships with their local schools, and they then come into the civil service and kind of, get people who are eligible to retire out, and they come in. Does Suffolk County have a similar program, or are you thinking of doing something similar to what the city is doing?
So we have an internship program. It's not a formal program in the way that we've heard about others here, which I'm very interested in learning more about, quite frankly. But we've had difficulty once the internship has ended, and then the person we decided is really somebody who would make a great member of our team. The testing process has really caused a limitation on their interest in continuing further. When the last thing many of the college students we've spoken to want to do once they've graduated and spent 4 years taking tests is to take another test, and that we find is an inhibiting factor.
How would you like to change the testing process?
I would like to have, oh geez.
Is that another hearing?
So I guess in broad terms, I'd like to move away from a hard and fast written test for almost every position and having to recruit one of the top 3 scorers. I think we need to do a better job of linking the quality of the tests to the actual skill sets necessary to do the jobs that we have. I have many examples of situations where we've given the test and it's just not representative of what skill sets we really need, and then we're stuck. I mean, if I can go on with that. What's that?
The LSAT.
100%, 100%. GMAT, MCATs, all of them. The best lawyers are not the ones that scored the least well on the LSAT.
And so we understand the testing is obviously critical, and it's there for a very important reason, to make sure that we're actually working to attract professional people into and there's not undue influence in it in any way. But there needs, of course, to be a balance, and particularly because we are living in an environment, what I would urge more than anything else, our world is changing more rapidly than it ever has before. And literally you could make that statement every day moving forward and it will be a true statement. Things are changing quickly. And what we need more than anything else at a local level is more flexibility to be able to recruit and retain the kind of talent we need. And how we achieve that and how we get there, we would love to have conversations about that. But that is I think what we need more than anything else in a rapidly changing world. Government has to be able to, it's difficult for government to keep up with the private sector simply because the private sector has a motive we will never have, an incentive we will never have. That is that they'll go out of business because of the profit motive. We don't have that. So we have that difficulty, but we need to, in this rapidly changing world, do everything we can to keep government moving at and adapting to that world as quickly as possible so that we can serve our residents as effectively as possible.
The city and state commissioners for civil service talked about some difficult to fill positions. They named engineering, they named nursing. Is that the same in Suffolk County, or are there others that we should be looking at?
Sure. I mean, those are areas of concern. Technology is the biggest one for us, quite frankly. It's changing so quickly, and we're really having trouble with that.
Can you elaborate on technology? Is it like IT work, or is it like beyond that?
It's beyond that. It's more like, well, there's two things. There's cybersecurity is one area. The other area is what we call business intelligence. So the software has gotten so powerful today that you can, if you have a base of data, you don't need to be a programmer anymore. You as a user, you can just go and ask questions, drill down on dashboards, and get information. In order to provide that accessibility, you need people who understand two things: the technology and how to give it the instructions to enable you to do that, and they also have to be aware of how operations in the county, in the government operate, because they are tasked with melding the technology with the business case. And so the stronger the the stronger the software gets, the more further removed the user, like you or I, get from that computer, but you need people then in the middle to do that. And it's changing literally every year. It changes. So those are the two things, cybersecurity and those things. And we're moving away from the old mainframe types of systems, like our payroll system, where you had 5 people that maintain that system, and doing more things in the cloud, which is more more technologically advanced than those things. So those are definitely the two areas.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Do you know, and this is my ignorance and how fast the world is changing on some of these technology points, those types of jobs that you describe, what type of education do you need? Do you know what educational credentials you need for that? Is it just someone who takes a class in that? Is it a certificate? No. Is it an entire 4-year course of study? Is it I have no clue.
Yeah, mostly it's a 4-year course of study, and sometimes beyond that. It's a quickly evolving field, and it's changing, as I say, every day. But definitely you need a bachelor's degree, and you need a series of experiences that enable you to understand the language of operations and business and technology at the same time. We are finding some recruits out of college. And we've talked to them about, and we've had discussions with State Civil Service about using time and experience tests for those kinds of skill sets. Mm-hmm. As Steve mentioned, we've had experiences where we have a written test. It just doesn't get into, and frankly, civil service, and I don't expect that they would, both in our local level and on the state level, doesn't really have the expertise to develop these types of tests and then grade those tests. I mean, it's changing. It's a very specific area.
One of the ways the state might be helpful in providing more flexibility would be to allow municipalities to present detailed plans to the state about how they would like to move forward with recruitment and retention and different things that might be a little bit different than the box that exists right now, and then give approval for those plans and provide oversight as well while those plans, because that would allow us potentially to be innovating around certain areas and give the state time to take a look at it and see how that works and see how it plays out. So give us the flexibility to change while at the same time providing oversight and making sure that we're still protecting the integrity of the system.
100%. And that, in my remarks, that's why I said we'd love to have a relationship with the state. We submit a human capital management plan where we've identified all the specific needs that we have in our workforce, where our liabilities are, et cetera, and then work with them within the framework of that plan where they would be able to monitor our activities based on what we said we were going to do. So 100% want to maintain the integrity of the system. We're not saying anything against that. I just want to get back to another question. You also talked about recruiting with other titles. We have difficulty recruiting truck mechanics also, because they come out of 2 years of school, community college, Suffolk Community College, and they can make 20-30% more out of the box working for Avis Rent-A-Car or somebody like that. So it runs the spectrum, the gamut. We're never going to be able, I don't believe, based on my 31 years of public service, be able to compete effectively only on salary with the private sector. It's not going to happen. So that's why I think we need to work on these other attributes that makes our organizations more attractive for people to be in.
That's a good point. Thank you.
So, first, let me thank you for coming in and giving testimony. And I went online while you were giving your presentation, and I see that you grew up right in the county.
That's right.
That you now are the executive in military service and college, law school. So you're like a local grown hero.
Yeah, Steve for president. Thank you.
And I'm serious. I'm not joking when I say that, because obviously I know individuals that have been involved in law where they could have made a whole lot of money, but they were involved in lawsuits and other activities in which it was going to help millions of children around the state. And so service is very important, and obviously you've served our country, and so I thank you for your service. And based on your testimony, I assume that everything that you read and put into the record as far as getting rid of the, I'm going to call it the bad, and bringing in some new blood in order to clean it up. And that's a good thing. I think that, in my opinion, if I was a resident of Suffolk County, I would say thank you. And then overall, let me ask the question, what is the budget of Suffolk County? And I asked that question with knowing what you said about the whole personnel and human resource and everything that you want to do. Do you have enough resources within your county to do all of that, understanding that there must be a certain period of time frame that you want to first get it together and then continuously upgrade it? So that's what my question is.
So we have nearly 10,000 employees, somewhere around the full-time employees, and a $3.2 billion budget. So it is a very large, it's not quite as big as the state budget, but it is a very large governmental organization by any standards across our country. So the resources are there. It's a question of how are those resources best deployed to serve the people of the county and the needs of the organization. And there are certain positions which I could identify today and be able to say, because of changes in the world, we need fewer of those positions, but because of those same changes, we need more of these positions. And having the flexibility to be able to, in a rapidly changing environment, to be able to make those changes in a quicker fashion is something that would help us greatly. But the most important thing that we can do is implement systems that really are empowering the people who serve in our government. I'm proud to serve alongside dedicated public servants, more than 9,000, as I said, employees full-time. And we need to have resources that are supporting their growth and development within the organization. Because of the things that we have confronted, unfortunately, basic pillars of that government do not exist. Basic things like a centralized human resources function where you would do training, you would handle recruitment and professional development aren't in existence, and we are in real time today creating them, Senator.
And so some of the changes from a civil service point of view, do you need permission from the State Civil Service Commission in order to give you whatever the directions you're trying to do within the system?
I think definitely yes, and there might be opportunities for changes in state law as well. And what we would love to have the opportunity to do is to continue the conversation and the discussion about ways to give us the flexibility that we need to advance the interests of the organization and the people that we serve, while at the same time protecting the integrity of the system.
Last year, I did a tour of schools. I'm most known for my involvement in education, and I went out to Wyandanch.
Yes. Very
and-
familiar with
And
Wyandanch.
and Monica Martinez is one state senator, and you have another state senator that handled that. Brooks. And Wyandanch is owed probably like $25 to $35 million under the foundation aid formula. And it's imperative, in order to have the type of employees from Suffolk County working for the government, that we educate our children so that they have the skills in order to be a part of that and include the type of diversity that you talked about in the beginning.
I as town supervisor and now as county executive, I've represented the community of Wyandanch for years. Back in 2002, I started the Wyandanch Rising Initiative, which ultimately became the largest community-based community revitalization effort on Long Island, and it continues to this day. And we have an obligation, Senator, not only because it's the right thing to do, to make sure that every individual and every community in our county has the opportunity for success, but if we want to enjoy success as a governmental organization and as a region, then we better be empowering and accessing the talents of everyone in our community.
Thank both of you for your service to Suffolk County and to the people of our great state.
Thank you very much. All right. We're going to shift gears here a little bit and hear from our SUNY and CUNY representatives, student representatives. So I want to invite up Austin Ostro, who is the president of the SUNY Student Assembly, and Timothy Hunter, who is the president of the CUNY University Student Senate.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. First, I just want to thank you so much, Senator, for accommodating Tim and I's homework schedule and allowing us to move up a little bit. As you said, my name is Austin Ostro, and I have the privilege of representing SUNY's 1.4 million full and part-time students as president of SUNY Student Assembly and the student member of the SUNY Board of Trustees. We really appreciated the invitation to be a part of this conversation, particularly me personally, as someone who's graduating in 3 months, considering my options post-grad school. Being in Albany as a student at UAlbany and seeing all of the opportunities for public service, it certainly strikes a chord that other opportunities don't. Our generation, and I think Tim would agree with this, is very values-driven. We're very philanthropic. We care about improving the world that we live in. You saw a very clear manifestation of that last year with the tremendous outpouring of student advocacy on climate change, and we continue to see that on a multitude of issues that impact our present and future. So there are millions of students in New York State who would love to pursue a values-driven career in public service. So why aren't there millions of people applying for jobs in public service? The answer, at least from the students I've had conversation with and from some of the data that we've seen, is the overwhelming student debt that our students face. We have thousands and thousands of students who are graduating with thousands and thousands of dollars in debt, and that leads to tough decisions that students need to make, particularly our most talented students who are achieving graduate, postgraduate degrees, who are the exact kind of talented thinkers and doers that New York State and our nation need. They may have, over the course of accruing 2 or 3 credentials, tens of thousands, if not over $100,000 in debt that they need to start paying back within 6 months of graduation. And as we all know, while there are a lot of benefits financially to entering public service, including a more generous pension and healthcare system than private sector entry employees might have access to, the salaries sometimes aren't super competitive. And very talented students and a job market as strong as the one we're enjoying currently are being pulled in a lot of different directions. So if we want to create a public service pipeline in New York State that brings students who have those credentials, who are interested in a values-driven career in public service, we need to get serious about how we offer and incentivize students to enter these careers, bearing in mind student debt. And that's why programs like the loan forgiveness program are so essential, both at the state and federal levels, to incentivizing students to make the decisions that align best with their values. See, students are willing to sacrifice something in order to enter these roles. We see it all the time. You know, being in Albany, seeing my friends who go to work for the legislature, or go to work for an agency doing good, over private options that I know are on the table, I know that the incentives, the moral incentives exist regardless of the action that anyone takes. But at the end of the day, you have to justify your decisions to your mom or dad who want to know how you're going to pay back those student loans, some of which might have been taken out in their names. So we need to protect and strengthen loan forgiveness. We need to make sure that students have access to loan forgiveness and debt relief so that they can make the sacrifices necessary, make that values-driven decision to enter public service. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Senator Gennardis, Senator Thomas, and also Senator Jackson for having us today. My name is Timothy Hunter, USS Chairperson and Student Trustee for the City University of New York, and I echo the same sentiments as my peer, Austin Ostro, mentioned that there are a lot of barriers and things that are preventing our students from succeeding in the public sector, and it's important that we do incentivize these things by providing adequate student loan forgiveness. But I think that we also lack the just proper training. I attended a CTE school, and I'm going to take it a little bit back to high school because I think that it really starts in 9 through 12 education, where we kind of teach these students the trades and opportunities and certifications that they actually need to succeed. So if you look at career and technical education in New York City, I guess throughout the rest of the state is known as like the BOCES schools, or schools that kind of offer trade experience. These are also public sector jobs. It's not just government, or just working in Albany or working in City Hall. There's also working for the MTA. There's also working for the Department of Ed. There's all these opportunities that our high school students are actually gaining real-time experience. The beauty of CTE schools, though, is that I think formerly known as quote-unquote vocational schools, and that was known as that's where the kids that may not be as academically talented or inclined, that's where they go to kind of learn a trade so they can still make ends meet. But the culture has now changed, and now career and technical education schools are adding not only an industry partner, but also a post-secondary partner that allows them to kind of partner with the CUNY school or SUNY school and actually send students directly in. I was actually able to benefit from that at a high school called City Polytechnical High School for Architecture and Engineering, which allowed me to attend City Tech, which is the New York City College of Technology, to get an associate's degree in civil engineering, architectural drafting, or construction management. So these are 3 trades that I can end up going into the public sector, working for DASNY, or working for Department of Buildings, whatever the case was. And a lot of my friends did go on to do such things. And I think it's important that we offer the amount, we need to double down on the funding that we're giving to these education programs, because we get OSHA certifications or OSHA classes and opportunities that we wouldn't get otherwise. These are things that you can't really get with a liberal arts degree. These are opportunities that aren't really afforded unless you're going out to get them. And if we incorporate them into our education, into our curriculum, we allow our students to kind of be a little bit more successful in the future. And even if they decide to not pursue that in the public sector, at least they have a job that they can work while attending school, which I was fortunate enough to do by attending another apprenticeship program called the Success Via Apprenticeship Program, which is a teacher training program. I'm pretty sure you've heard from NYSA and maybe from the UFT that a lot of unions across the country are eyeing this teacher shortage. Why can't we engage and have more students becoming teachers? So this program, which has been around since I think the late 70s, early 80s, recruits high school students that went to these career and technical education high school, these vocational schools, and recruits them to become vocational teachers while kind of simultaneously attending a college to get a bachelor's degree in education. Now, this is a great opportunity because we get paid starting teacher salary. We're able to kind of have union benefits, we're protected by the UFT no matter what. And then at the same time, we're also able to, develop the skills that we need to just understand what it's like in college and convey that to our students while simultaneously teaching and gaining private sector experience throughout our 5-year course. So I think that doubling down our investment in like a higher education as it relates to career public service pipelines is super important and imperative to our success, but we need to make sure that we're getting the students involved and exposing them to these things earlier, like not just waiting until they come into college and figuring out what's next, but like I think the senator mentioned, someone realizing that there was an opportunity for them to get involved in government through a poster, having more opportunities to interact with our guidance counselors in high school and letting them know that, hey, this is an option, you can do these other things, because there's a whole bunch of pipeline programs that exist, but people don't even know that they exist because there's not enough promotion being done around it or communication being done around it. So again, just echoing the same sentiments as Austin, making sure that we incentivize it, but also making sure that we involve the schools and the education system in this process.
Great. Thank you both very much. Can you, as current students now, can you talk about what you see happening on either your specific campuses or the campuses of the students that you represent in terms of outreach and recruitment from public sector agencies, employment opportunities, et cetera, and how it's being marketed to graduating students?
Sure. So I'll hedge by saying I go to UAlbany, which is probably the campus that's most directly a public service pipeline, but also from being around the system. I think there are those channels for students enrolled in specific programs, but students don't fully comprehend the diversity of profession and skills that are needed in public service, in the civil service system. So as a political science grad and my colleagues who are in public policy, those opportunities, I think, are brought to them for applied learning, for internships. But students in technical programs like Tim and the programs he described, from my experience speaking to those students, I think they're less informed and there's less information shared with them about the opportunities that exist. So there's a little bit of a mismatch depending on the area that's needed professionally and academically.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of that, I think that I think that in terms of the marketing of it, you're lucky if you see a poster sometimes. There is a poster for my major, so I'm a weird major. I just tell everybody it's education, but it's actually career and technical teacher education. So I teach architectural drafting. And there's one poster that I see always around our school that just says, would you want to be a shop teacher? You can make $40,000 a year starting salary. Please go to this room. And that's pretty much the extent to the marketing of that. A great opportunity, right, that you can get someone that, let's say a mechanical engineering major that really doesn't isn't getting through in calculus 2, but is really good at using a software, that could potentially be a engineering teacher at a high school and get unionized and have a really successful career and retire and move to Florida or whatever it is that people do after they retire.
Stay in New York.
Or maybe stay in New York, move to Buffalo. Yeah, exactly. Or I think that it's important that we try to market it better, and the marketing that we're seeing is not on boots on the ground. We're not seeing it done the way that it should be done. And alluding to the point I mentioned earlier, it's not just government that's public service. I think we need to demolish that narrative. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad that we do have people that are in government that are willing to work and do public service. But there's other means to get involved. I think a great major that's at my school is human services, which allows people to kind of go work for ACS or go do HR in the private sector, but also come back and maybe do HR in the state legislature if they wanted to. Being able to kind of diversify your portfolio, but that only starts with exposure. Those people also need to be bringing tabling at our schools and bringing more awareness to these opportunities, or looking at specific majors and figuring out how to come out with a 1-year plan to reach out to majors specifically. Because I think that everybody's talking about this pipeline to success, but it's a really leaky pipeline. Everybody falls through the cracks because there's no constantly applied pressure to making sure that our students are engaged and involved. And if I'm a college student that's working full time at let's say doing retail, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for classes, the last thing on my mind is, how can I become a public sector employee and get union benefits? And I think that we know that here because we do our research and we look it up, but if no one's telling them that, the professors aren't telling them that because they're advocating for their contract, as they should, but I think that there needs to be more engagement somehow, whether it's an initiative or a campaign, a marketing strategy, but there needs to be something that engages our students locally.
And I don't know the answer to this. Usually you try to ask the questions you already know the answer to. I don't know the answer to this. Do you, in your college careers, have to go for any mandatory academic advisement?
So, students need to go for academic advisement in terms of what classes they're going to take next semester. There's no check anywhere in the process to ensure that students are on a trajectory towards a profession at the end of their academic career. I think that's a gap.
Yeah, and also just alluding to that as well, like it's campus by campus. There are some campuses that have like a mandatory, when you come in, you have to go for this advisement, and you have to take, like, let's say this class that teaches you how to write a resume and do all these other things. But because like the academic, I guess, structure on every campus varies so much, because of course, like, you have academic senate, and like unless like someone from the top executive says something, there's nothing that's mandatory across the board. And whether that's like an advisement like session or like a course that's like generic, that's across SUNY and CUNY, that like gives an info session on public sector jobs and employment, maybe tailored to specific schools. Because I think what you're kind of trying to get is like, where can we inject this information to our students? But right now, if you were to say like there's a catch, I don't think there's any catch-all, because some students, I know some students that haven't gone for advisement all year and are about to graduate just because they look at their degree works, they look at what they need, and they just apply for classes. So I think that something like a small 2-credit course, like maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but that's something that in my opinion would be really like helpful, just not like giving that information. I think that would be helpful.
And I guess you can do that even outside of the public sector context. I mean, maybe some type of just career counseling check-in, right? Like, we don't have to put you on a path. Maybe you know what your path is already. We just want to check a box and say, okay, do you know what you need to get to your path? And just have some way to kind of help guide that journey that every student is taking. I don't know if Senator Thomas or
You asked all the questions I wanted.
Senator Jackson.
So, let me thank you for coming in, and you're all, when both of you, meaning CUNY and SUNY, is always at hearings to make sure that we, legislators, hear what the students' voice is, which is very, very important. And when I listen to both of you, how intelligent and articulate you are in putting forward the position on behalf of the student body, I'm very, very proud of both of you and other representatives that come in front of us, knowing that you're going to be great leaders. You are great leaders right now, but even more so, you may be the governor or the mayor of New York or whatever you want to do. Just continue to work on behalf of the people. One of the things that I was thinking about regarding making sure that students are aware of all of the other things that are available, and that said, I thought about the state budget of $178 billion and how SUNY and CUNY basically scratch trying to get as much funding from an operations point of view. And if there was more funding to provide that type of service on a continuous basis, then basically you're growing within. And I don't know, based on what I heard, that that's there. It may be there in some little respects, but not as comprehensive as, I guess, is needed, so that we can grow our own leaders, and rather than young people like yourselves going out into the private sector. So I ask you to stay involved in the budgetary process so we can get more money for CUNY and SUNY from an operations point of view and from a capital point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson, for your advocacy. I see that you have your CUNY wristband on, so I'm glad that we make sure that we
Even
get
though
everybody.
I'm a SUNY alum.
That's cool. I'm pretty sure Austin will get you one.
The King of New Paltz.
Yeah, I think that it's super important that we continue to stay active, but that the state legislature continues to reach out to us. If there's anything, a hearing or anything like that, please let us know, because something like this, I think our insight is also important. I know oftentimes you're hearing from all the big wigs and all the executives and all the deputy commissioners and chairs of this and chairs of that. But I think that hearing from the students that it directly affects, far too often we make decisions about students without any students being in the room, and I think it's important that you continue to let us be in these spaces. But thank you.
I think that's a point very well taken, and I think it's a good reminder to us that we've heard about some good things already happening this morning already, but we also heard about the information gap that exists on some of the campuses that you represent, and how an opportunity might be good, but if it's not made available to everyone in the right way, well, then it kind of diminishes how impactful it could potentially be. So I think you really helped highlight that for us in a very, very real way. But that's all the questions I have. One last question. What, if you could recommend to us one thing you'd like to see us do in this area to help make it easier for students like yourselves to go down this path, what would be the one recommendation and the one ask you would have that we could, look into more and pursue?
Sure. I think for me, it would be considering holistically the incentive structure and how young people react differently to different incentives than they might have in the past. I think for a previous generation, those wraparound benefits, pension, healthcare, were more valued in the deliberative process over your first job out of college or your second job out of college than they are now. Part of that is because a lot of the kids are staying on their parents' healthcare plans till 26, but it's also just a difference in values, a difference in what students want to get out of their job. Conversely, though, I think you'll have more and more students who are choosing to enter public service not because they see that the benefits are so great, but because they really, really believe in the mission of the organization and they want to be a part of doing good. So with that in mind, looking at how the student loan forgiveness can be strengthened, particularly because the program on the federal level is in so much jeopardy. The president has made it a real target. Students see that. There's no guarantee that when a current freshman graduates, it'll still be in place. I think having New York step up in that respect and offer guarantees to students to say if you enter into an education program, if you commit to being a teacher to 10 years of that public service, your loans will be eventually forgiven. If they get that kind of guarantee, despite the uncertainty in Washington, that could go a long way.
And I'm pretty sure that Austin touched on the aspect of the macro, but in terms of the smaller picture as well, I think that the incentivizing again is super important. And a lot of the pipeline programs, I'm pretty sure when I sat in the back and I heard some of the questions, it's being done on some level, and I think that the student loan forgiveness is definitely a huge part of that conversation. But I also think that consulting the different stakeholders, I would love to see just a small roundtable discussion with the chancellor of, well, in our case, if CUNY, and the chancellor of the Department of Ed, and figuring out where that dovetail is in that career pipeline so we can get our students a little bit earlier. I think that there's no reason why that if there's a school in let's say the Bronx that's doing automotive, we aren't directly trying to pipeline people into another program, at a college, at a city university in New York College. If there's another group that's doing human resources or human services, I don't know why we're not trying to pipeline those students there instead of letting them apply to a different place and then get lost in the private sector and take out all these loans and come back and say, well, now I'm definitely not doing public service. At least give them the opportunity to be able to say, well, I know this is an option and I'm going to keep it in my head because this is a really good option here. I think that the reason why I got involved in public service and I actually worked in the Department of Ed for 4 years because my mom's a teacher. She teaches special education. So because she knows that there's these opportunities here, she's like, hey, Tim, this is another great opportunity. You should definitely try to take advantage of it. And if there's not anybody that's on your shoulder or telling you that, then you're never going to apply for it. You can't apply to things that you don't know exist. So I think that having that roundtable discussion with the educational leadership on both sides, especially I think bringing in SUNY and whatever the state counterpart is, I'm not too sure right now. But I think that's a conversation that needs to happen as soon as possible because I know that the state legislature runs on 2-year cycles, but those people are there for a long time and they may have some good information that would be able to help you all.
Great.
Yep. Just wanted to express to you how important it is. Both of you are very young. You're part of the millennium age. And when I first joined state service, I could have joined the pension at Tier 2. But I needed additional money because I had a family, and I didn't join right away. And no one educated me that Tier 2 was being phased out and Tier 3 was coming into effect. And so when I became a permanent employee, I was automatically in Tier 3, in which they were taking out 3% of my gross salary every pay period. No one told me, no one educated me. When I was in the city council and we were moving from Tier 4 to Tier 5, I told all of my employees, about 10 of them in the city council, and they were in management confidential, join the pension, join the pension. And one individual did not join the pension, And 1 week before it was being transitioned to Tier 5, I told that individual, if you don't join the pension, I'm going to fire you. They looked at me with shock. Was I going to fire the individual? No. I was just telling that individual what was best for them. And right now, they're not in public service. But if they ever go back, they're in Tier 4 versus Tier 6. Those are the type of education that we have to do to young people and overall have people communicating so they know what their options are. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I'll go out on a limb and speak for Senators Thomas, Jackson, and myself and say we're very glad you don't live in our districts because we we want to keep working with you and we don't want we want you guys to go into public service, just not against us. You guys are really terrific student leaders, and you've really I say that jokingly. Since I've been in office working with both of you on student issues at both CUNY and SUNY, you've been tremendous and really you've really helped elevate the voice of students in a very, very, very positive way, and I thank you both for doing that and for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We're just humming right along here, aren't we? Thank you, everyone, for your patience and your indulgence. Our next panelist is the Executive Director for Nassau County Civil Service Commission, Martha Crissell.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Martha Kreisel, and as stated, I currently serve as the Executive Director of the Nassau County Civil Service Commission. I'm the past president of the Nassau County Bar Association, a practicing attorney for close to 40 years, and a resident of Nassau County since 1986. While we're talking glowingly about SUNY, I will just tell you that I am a graduate of SUNY Buffalo, both college and law school. My law school degree cost a total of $6,000, from which my mom and dad, who were New York City school teachers, were able to help me because it was $1,000 a semester. That was 1980 when I received that degree. Having said that, I've used that $6,000 degree extensively, and it allowed me to launch a career in not-for-profit and public sector. The debt the students carry now is absolutely staggering. The Nassau County Civil Service Commission's portfolio includes more than 50 Nassau County agencies, including its hospital and community college, as well as 2 towns, 64 incorporated villages, schools, libraries, and special districts. Nassau County has approximately 1,358,000 residents and an unemployment rate of only 3.4%, according to the New York State Department of Labor. In addition, its housing costs, home ownership, as well as rental are extremely high. These factors contribute to the difficulty in recruiting public sector talent. In addition, civil service examinations may require college graduation prior to the application process, but the private sector can actively recruit juniors and seniors, which further contributes to a shortage of applicants, especially when coupled with the extreme budgetary limitations of public sector salaries. You asked before the other speakers about which sectors are the hardest, and I will tell you that Nassau Community College, for example, will be told by Winthrop Hospital, we will take all your radiation technology graduates that you have, sight unseen, and the salaries are almost 3 times what you can start at my Department of Health or at my Department of Social Services. So it is a serious, serious problem for us, one that we deal with all the time. Returning more to the pipeline, when I came in as executive director, I was aware of private sector recruitment on campus. And one of the things that we did that I think is interesting, and I would be happy to share further, our classification staff worked collaboratively with one of our largest agencies, which is the Department of Public Works. And we designed 2 pathways to encourage college students to enter the public sector. And the first is we created intern titles for college students. One is called administrative intern, which is part-time employment opportunities to students who are enrolled full-time. I have job specifications that, again, I would be happy to share with anybody that would find it helpful. The other title is cooperative college intern, and that requires participation in a cooperative education program, and it allows students to work in a position related to their fields of study. The second pathway that we are implementing now, aside from the internships that I've just described, is to hold exams using anticipated eligibility. You heard a little bit from Suffolk County about the need to have a college degree to sit for some examinations. So the anticipated eligibility allows students who are approaching graduation to participate in exams that have traditionally required a degree. Those candidates must submit proof of completion of the courses, but not until they're eligible for appointment, as opposed to before they can sit for the exam itself. These 2 options are intended to help public sector employers compete with the private sector in recruiting college students entering the workforce. The intern titles allow students to gain exposure to the environment and the advantages of public sector employment. After experiencing the benefits that the public sector offers, which have been talked about extensively today, students are more likely to opt for full-time public sector employment after college. And allowing students to sit for the examinations means that the full-time employment is possible at the time of graduation rather than merely sitting for the exam. And these strategies help the public sector compete against the private sector. These may sound like no-brainers, but this is really something that we're starting to implement now. You heard New York City talk a little bit, and it's true, about the interplay between the existing competitive class titles and the non-competitive intern titles. So we are fully aware that even though a student may be afforded a wonderful professional experience as an intern, that employment is temporary and it doesn't guarantee the future full-time, because under the competitive civil service system, the students who work as interns and choose to take an exam are taking the exam. They don't have an advantage over other exam takers. And so, other than the fact that they've been exposed to the public sector and they understand the very special environment that it is. But going forward, our commission is focusing on the development of a legally sound transition in compliance with civil service law, of course, from temporary non-competitive positions to full-time competitive positions. And we look forward specifically to working with New York State toward this end. I wanted to make one more note, which is that there is on the state level a professional career opportunities examination that's held every few years, and this is a generalized exam that does lead to entry-level employment opportunities in a wide variety of fields. And that requirement is a bachelor's degree, but the state does use, for that particular exam, anticipated eligibility, allowing students within 18 months or so of graduation to participate. So on behalf of the commissioners that I represent, Chair Alan Parenti, Commissioner Carnell Foskey, Commissioner Gary Ackerman, and of course on behalf of Nassau County's County Executive Laura Curran, I'm very grateful to have been asked to participate in this. We work very, very hard at outreach. We attend all job fairs whenever we're invited. We also work very actively with a newly established Asian American agency in Nassau County, with the Hispanic Affairs Agency, and with Minority Affairs. We provide 2 different types of workshops. One is literally in a classroom where we have computers, where we show people how to sign up for the examinations, how to process that, which can be very, very confusing. And we also talk generally about the many opportunities. IT is very, very difficult. IT, again, with the BOCES program, there are employers out there that we cannot compete with, but many people do like working for government, and as a result, we feel that if you have recently come to our country and you are not familiar with the civil service system, we need to do that type of outreach as well, and we're widely available to do that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I'll ask you some of the same questions I asked the other jurisdictional representatives. Can you give us a sense, the workforce you have now at the county level, what your 5-year retirement outlook looks like in terms of percentages?
I was lucky because while you were asking the other people,
It's always easier the second or third time you ask
I was
it, right?
emailing my staff, and we have the number that I got in the immediate retirement is about, we're anticipating for like this year about 350 employees. Our complete workforce is about 15,000. Remember that we have about 2,500 at NUMIC, or Nassau Community, the hospital there, which is a very large employer. And then I also did get some information when the other questions were asked, and I don't want to, but just to get this out there, I got information about the times that we do waive application fees. I can elaborate on that, or I can submit additional information to the, just in the interest of saving time. I can do a one-pager, shoot that out
Great.
to you. That would have a comprehensive follow-up report.
Yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. I think it helps, hearing from some of the other panelists what the numbers look like. It helps shine a light on the, almost the urgency of trying to, address the changing and the aging workforce we have in many levels of government. And so, if, as we heard, some jurisdictions have a higher rate, some have a lower, that helps guide our efforts. So any information you can share on that would be really appreciated. Do you have existing, you mentioned going to career fairs and whenever you're invited, do you have any existing partnerships with institutions of higher education in the county or outside the county
Yes.
that you can talk about?
Yeah, we do. So for one thing, some of our colleges do offer employee tuition discounts to the employees. For another thing, let's say we have a particular need. We had a change in administration that began at the beginning of 2018, and with that comes a lot of new ideas and consolidation and all sorts of different incentives, and we work with those colleges because now we're looking for an analytics degree, or we're looking to offer an immediate opportunity for people to come in and work on a specific project, or we're finding out more about their majors and what they do and telling them more about what our needs are, or we're listening to our unions talk about the fact that continuing education in real property appraisal is not readily available, and that would be helpful so that we can hire employees and not have to use outside vendors who might have previously provided that type of information to us. So we have a strong working relationship that can always be improved. Just for example, when I talk about the Department of Public Works having this new cooperative, that takes work on part of the colleges also. Those two things have to dance together, and there has to be good communication. And that's why what we say in my office, what we say at the Civil Service Commission is we take our cues from the appointing authorities. Those are the agencies for which we are responsible. So if, for example, the libraries tell us that they have a problem because if they have to wait for people to complete their masters, and they say to us, well, in Rochester, they're now doing this, that's the kind of information that we take and we roll that into our revised specifications on a regular basis. We meet with the libraries, we meet with the schools, we meet with every village. You can be a tiny sanitation district, but if you have a new need because they're about to put in new water regulations that your current staff has never been trained in, and they now need a job specification to reflect that, we will revise that specification. When I say we, the staff drafts it, it goes to our commission and for our local civil service commission, and then there is the interplay with New York State as well, because certain decisions that we make are approved by New York State, with whom we have a very, very day-to-day positive working relationship. And I just want to throw one last thing out that might be helpful to you. We have a group, and it's of all the civil service providers from New York State, whether you are Otsego County or whether you are Nassau County or whether you are anything in between, and we talk all day long. So if this state commission committee needs particular information about a particular issue, we throw those questions out to each other all day long, and then there's immediate, how much are you paying, what'd you do about this, what are we going to do about state is delaying this. There's a chit chat all the time. It's not behind civil services back at all. In fact, at the annual conference, the civil service staff comes and and provides the training. So it's a real working group. And I'm in all the years I'm practicing, it's probably the most effective way of really getting that information out. How do you do your physical fitness test? Is it before the medical? Is it before the psychological? We do it this way. Great ideas, open exchange. It's a safe environment to just brainstorm and bring out the very best in public sector employment.
Thank you, Director, for coming and testifying. I may have missed this in your opening remarks. How many students do you currently have, the interns that work for the county?
Well, the interns are sprinkled throughout our different agencies, and a lot of our students also come in on what's called our seasonal program. So it depends very much on the time of year. Those seasonal employees might do anything from being a lifeguard to being more of a counselor, or to coming in on a particular IT-specific summer experience. So the number would really vary depending. We work with the Summer Youth Employment Program. We work with seasonals. The county executive has a volunteer internship program. County attorney, where I spent many, many of my years, also has students constantly from the colleges, from the law schools, from the paralegal programs working with us. I wouldn't even begin to guess at a number, but it's a very, very vibrant part of our staff.
Now, how many of those do you offer a full-time position to?
We encourage all of them. One of the things I do during the summer is I do a presentation on civil service, and we encourage them to go onto the civil service website and fill out what are called interest cards, so that they'll be automatically notified. Let's say we have a student who is a sophomore, accounting major. We can't offer them an accounting 1 position unless they're on a list, if they sit for the examination. But we do proactively notify them of upcoming opportunities, because that's a very important part of the process. The applications are time sensitive. The tests are not given on a regular basis that as you might picture. We're dependent on New York State to issue most of the examinations. And so we require anyone interested, that's the first thing we teach them, is that you proactively identify what you want, and then you'll be notified so that we can make that part of it. And if you are interning with us and you know what your plans are in the future, you'd be particularly interested in that. That's why I don't want to wait until they have college degrees if I don't have to, because I don't want to lose them to Ernst & Young. I don't want to lose my all the engineering students to the private sector. It's a very big part of my daily working and the other is to pull that talent in before it's taken away. The other issue that we're working on a lot with our schools is that we are seeing different types of graduates, and they may not have a traditional high school diploma. They may not have even a GED, which is identified, but there are different types of superintendent's diplomas that reflect some of the special needs students, and we want to make sure that students with those different types of degrees are not excluded from the labor positions, which do not necessarily require a competitive examination, as well as our open competitive examinations. So we work proactively in both of those regards.
Okay. What kind of changes do you want to see within the system so you can recruit top talent?
I want to see the ability to compete with the private sector, specifically in not losing the talent pool. I heard loud and clear what these two lovely young men said about not even knowing necessarily about the system unless you happen to have a dad who was a police sergeant, or so I want the students to grow up knowing that public sector is a career path. I also want the entire county of Nassau, which is incredibly diverse at this point, I want them to understand, all the students to understand that, for example, there's careers in law enforcement that everybody can apply for. And furthermore, that little thing that what you do in high school or college will be reviewed in your law enforcement application. And you can be disqualified based upon errors that lots and lots of students make, especially now as we know the student debt is becoming a problem. So I want people to grow up understanding the beauty and importance of a public sector career, what it has to offer them, but what it needs to do, what they need to do to not be excluded therefrom. That's really what I would love to see.
You just talked about student loan debt and it being a factor in
Correct.
excluding certain individuals. Like, for what positions are you talking about?
If your credit history is in very bad shape, when you're evaluated for certain types of positions under New York State civil service law, where you have to have good moral character, that can be a factor. Having said that, the applicant investigators are very receptive to you having some type of a loan payment plan in place. And so most of the applicants will come in and they'll say, oh yes, I did owe Adelphi University $8,000. I was in default or arrears. However, now I'm working with them and I have a repayment plan. That's not a problem. The bigger problem is not having a plan going forward, because that affects your credit history. It would not in and of itself disqualify you, but it would be something that I would recommend if you were applying for a career in law enforcement, that you get that in order. And that's very difficult because the debt is high now. It's just a whole different world. And it's something that I think about a lot, especially having had the advantage of a full public education. I grew up in Queens. It was a whole different thing. If there were private schools, I didn't know about them. It just was a whole different thing than what I see happening now. And so it's easy to have that debt, and it's a little bit harder to manage it. And I have seen students not qualify for financial aid at the graduate level because of what they even have from the undergraduate level. So it's sort of like it cuts both ways. I mean, they want to advance in order to get that higher salary, but on the other hand, because now there's more pressure to not just loan, they say that the student debt is going to be the next mortgage foreclosure crisis, and there's all this talk about that. And so I think the schools are starting to worry about that. Also, as I see my own children who are way out of school, as I see them with their friends, there's more and more of a demand for guarantees for your rent. And they'll now start to look at that student debt, where I have been told that in the past they didn't cross-reference those types of things. And that's very concerning as well.
Just want to close out my questions by saying student loan debt has nothing to do with one's character.
Right.
You know, student loan program was created to get people out of poverty.
Right.
And these days it's just keeping them in poverty for decades and even till death, and
Right.
we need to change that system.
I agree with you. They say that it's worse than debtors' prison, student loan debt, non-dischargeable. And again, a well-reasoned plan to get into a repayment plan goes a very, very long way. That really was the point I was trying to make.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy.
You're welcome.
I'll just echo Senator Thomas's comments. I had a law school professor who said to us, half jokingly, but he was actually being very honest, if you die before you pay off your loans, you win.
Correct.
And that is the most depressing and yet brutally honest thing I think any of my professors ever told me in school. And it's a reality that many of us are confronting on a daily basis. And it is a huge crisis. And I think one thing we've definitely learned from today is how much more focus we should be putting on this. And so I'm glad Senator Thomas is here chairing the Consumer Protection Committee. It's something that we're going to take a good look at for sure. I think you've answered all my questions. I would appreciate the follow-up information you mentioned
be
in
happy
your
to
opening.
provide
That would be
that.
really helpful. And I thank you for your willingness and eagerness to be here today.
I'm delighted to be here, and I'm planning on staying for the rest of the day, so thank you.
Great. So we're coming up on just about 3 hours, and so we're going to take a 5-minute break. People might want to stretch their legs, use the restroom or whatever. And it's 12:37 now, according to my clock. Let's plan 5 minutes, but we'll really start at 12:50. Okay? Thank you. All right, we're going to get started 5 minutes earlier because I know it's a Friday and we're already in the afternoon hour, and I know people want to go out there and enjoy the blistering cold New York environment. So we will get started. And again, thank you everyone for sticking with us this long. The added benefit of being here this long, though, is now we have fewer senators who could stay, so that means fewer questions, or so we hope. Our next panel are Josh Terry, the Legislative Director of CSEA, and Matt D'Amico, Coordinator of CSEA Metro Region 2. Gentlemen, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator. I do wish Senator Jackson was still here, though, so I could jump on his train of Tier 6 is terrible. But I'll tell him that another time. So thank you for having this hearing. This is a issue that we've been speaking with legislators like yourself and the state and local government officials for a long time. CSEA, you know this, we represent state government workers as well as local governments throughout the whole state. We have 1,200 different bargaining units in every county in the state. We represent 50 out of the 57 non-New York City counties and thousands of the municipalities underneath them. And so we look at this from a few different angles. One, you've brought up, we have retirements happening. The workforce is aging, and that's a worry to us. The worry that I want to talk about, though, today is who's not coming in to fill those jobs right now, and what are the barriers to entry? And you have my testimony, so I'm going to go over this briefly. The one barrier to entry that is not listed in my testimony is civil service law. And I respectfully disagree with Suffolk County. I don't think existing civil service law is stopping people from entering public service. I'm not saying that civil service is perfect, but to me, there's so much more that we need to focus on before we would look at that as being the barrier to entry. So what are the barriers? One are lack of career paths within state government and local governments. So, for example, we represent mental health therapy aides and developmental assistants within OPWDD. Usually they traditionally come out of high school or is a new career. They don't have a certification, they don't have a license, and a lot of them, people don't come into those jobs because they're really hard, but there's no real clear path. So if somebody comes in that wants to be in healthcare and they think, someday I want to be an LPN or I want to be a registered nurse, there's no set path that the state says, hey, you come in and we'll help pay for your training over the next 5 years or 10 years. We will help you get to become a registered nurse. That path doesn't exist. So people don't see an avenue outside of just becoming in and being a mental health therapy aide, which is very valuable work. And I'm not downplaying the work that they do. They do God's work with people with a mental illness. But some people don't want to just do that. There's no other way, and they don't see the avenue. So they don't enter state service because they say, well, I could go work for this hospital that maybe does have a private hospital that does have that path, and they're gonna pay me a little bit more money and all that stuff. So we need to, the state and local governments need to become better at building career paths and laying them out and announcing them to everybody, announcing them to college students or people in high school, saying, if you want to be an RN, we have a path for you, and it's not going to cost you a dime because here's how we're going to train you. The second part I want to talk about is we do represent titles that do have certifications and licenses, so CNAs and LPNs. But how do we access these programs? These programs are a lot of times, we've talked about BOCES programs and community college programs. BOCES programs are great if you are in high school and are able to access them there. But once you graduate, if you decide after high school that you want to take a CNA certificate program, you're no longer able to take that program for free, for lack of a better term. You have to pay the tuition, you have to pay the fees. The same thing if you're at a community college. Those are not cheap courses, and if you're somebody who is maybe in poverty or on the cusp of poverty, that's a barrier to entry. And unfortunately, since a lot of those programs are certification programs, they don't qualify for financial aid. They're not considered a educational program by the federal government or by our state government. So you can't get a subsidized loan. You're really going to try to pay out of pocket for this or take on a higher priced loan that's going to cost you even more. So we view that we need to really expand our BOCES programs and our community college programs. They're out there. We need to make them more accessible. And it would behoove me if I left here without talking about pay and benefits for our public service workforce. Labor unions negotiate pay scales, but we do not determine where a job is placed on a pay grade. And a lot of times we look at where these jobs are placed, and we'll talk about people that work with a developmental disability. They're doing the hardest job possible with clients who sometimes that's the only person that they deal with. They might not have family. And when we look at where they are in their pay scale, the state is showing us what the value of that worker is, which is not much. It's barely above the state minimum wage a lot of times of $15. We're barely above that, even with the contracts we negotiate, because we're not placing that job on the pay grade. And so if we want to get serious about recruiting people into state service, into human services, we need to look at the pay. We need to look at where are these jobs placed. And it's not comparing them to the private sector, because the private sector are not-for-profits that quite frankly aren't doing any better than the state. Because there's no profit in what we do, there's no way to make money. It is imperative for us to look at this and try to move these people up a pay scale. And the benefits, there used to be a trade-off. You used to come in, make less money than the private sector, especially if you were a professional. You'd make less money, but you had a really solid pension, you had really great health insurance, and we flipped this. Over the last decade, we have 2 new pension tiers, and Tier 6 is a detriment to people coming into state service. People look at that and they say, I can go work at OPWDD doing super difficult work, caring for patients sometimes, and I don't get to leave all day, and I can make just above minimum wage, and I still have to pay more for my pension and a lot for health insurance, or I can go to the private sector in New York City and make a little bit less, and people are taking that other option. So I think these are the 3 barriers in our minds that we need to start addressing, that we really need to look at. And we look forward to working with you. This is it's been a long-term problem that's developed, and it's not going to be solved this session or next year. But I think we can make some real progress going forward.
At least that takes some of the pressure off me when you say we're not going to solve it this session or this year. So that's good.
2 years.
2 years, right? 2 years. No, thank you very much. Matt, do you have anything to add? Or you?
No, I mean, just, a lot of my information is anecdotal with working with a lot of the state workers and also our nonprofits here in the city. But as Josh said, a lot of them do this work because it is something they really believe in. But I think we do have to do a better job of making sure that this is work that is valued. We also have to do a better job of really seeing what we can do in a creative way to incentivize this work so that people do not leave. There's a very high turnover rate, and our workforce, as has been said, is aging. We have an aging workforce, but the need is not decreasing. The need is increasing. The need for social services and the need for a lot of what the work these state agencies do, which, as I know when you met, are also revenue-generating agencies for the state. So it behooves the state to really make sure that these agencies are staffed as best that they can. And Josh really hit on some things, and I think we could collaboratively come up with ideas that can make this state civil service, local government civil service really attractive to a new generation of people.
Thank you. When I met with some of your members earlier in the fall, it struck me how similar to what I said about the Suffolk County workers that I met, they really enjoyed where they were working, what they were doing, because they thought they knew that they were adding value to the state and to the functioning of the state, and that more than anything else was their driver for why they were so passionate and committed to their job, which I really, really appreciated, and I think speaks to why we're even having this conversation in the first place. Josh, you mentioned some of the pathways, defined pathways. In your understanding and experience, what pathways currently are defined that you know of in state government that your members are able to take advantage of, if any?
Yeah, I don't think that there's any kind of official, for lack of a better term, avenues on how our members enter. I was kind of chuckling at what somebody said earlier about sometimes the only way you know about a job is because you're a family member. We have generations of CSEA members that we know that are all work within OPWDD or within OMH, and so it's word of mouth, and that's something I think we need to get better at. There are people that leave high school that do not go to college, and that's not a bad thing, and that's okay. And if we market the state to them, because quite frankly, right now, if you went to the state civil service website, you could be hired within a couple weeks in certain jobs, OMH and OPWDD, where we have huge deficits of staffing deficits. But we don't market it. We don't tell people that these jobs are available. And I think that's part of our problem, Senator, is that there is no kind of, we talk about the pipeline. There's, I don't know what we have here. It's just random people coming in at random times to maybe a website or something like that. And that's how we gain entry. I wish there was a more condensed way to do it, and maybe there can be, but I think I don't think we market this properly. I don't think we tell people what's available as they come out of high school.
Okay, no, that's a point well taken. I appreciate that. Do you have a sense, one of the big themes from today, as you've heard, has been student loans and debt. Do you have a sense from your membership how many of your members carry student debt? And if so, what the level of that debt burden is?
I don't know that answer. We do know, so our membership, most of our jobs don't require a college education that are in CSEA bargaining units. But we do know about 50% or so of our members have a college degree or some college.
Post-secondary, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of the debt load that we have, we don't keep track of that. That's not something we know. But it is something that our members talk about, especially ones that go into jobs like social work that are coming out with a 4-year degree, or some of the more, the professionalized jobs that we represent.
Okay, yeah, it's a shame that, no one's, not just you, but even when I asked the state commission, no one really has a good sense of that, because I think that helps us narrow down, as we're talking about this being a problem, well, it helps us drill down on how big of a problem it actually is, so we can then think about targeted solutions to help those folks, whether it's forgiveness or some other avenue to really, because I imagine, to your point, it's not every state worker that has a college degree, and not every state worker that has a college debt or grad school debt or law school debt or whatever. So really honing in on a solution there is going to be crucial. What, if there was one kind of immediate step or takeaway that you would propose or recommend that we should, start thinking about, like yesterday, what do you think that would be?
I think it is the wholesale marketing. Of jobs that are available. There are a tremendous number of jobs available today, but they're buried. I mean, you can go to the State Civil Service website, and that's fine. I might be able to find it because I know what I'm looking for, but we need to be promoting these jobs. And I will give it to places like OMH and OPWDD. They have begun to start trying to use social media to crank up their recruiting, but I don't think it's enough. I mean, I don't think we're talking about this in as often as we should be.
Okay, great.
And can I just dovetail on one thing you said? Student loans, and I agree, we need to probably find a solution to the student loans, especially in the public sector. But one way we can address this is if we get it on the front end. If somebody comes in without a college degree, and the state says, "Hey, come on in. We'll pay for, if you want to become an RN, we're going to pay for it, or we'll help you pay for it if you stay working for us." That way, we're filling our immediate need of a direct care worker, and we're going to fill it in later on when we need something more technical or somebody with more education. Hopefully they're going to stay with the state at that point because they like working here. They see their pension, they have health insurance, et cetera. So I think that's one way that we can look at it going forward, rather than just trying to look backwards on this.
Right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And in my mind, I mentioned this earlier. We have this Excelsior scholarship for a certain limited number of students in the state. I would much rather see a program like that for all students with a public service component attached to it. I think that's a great way to incentivize and get people into the public sector and really help. Students who probably need that help the most, frankly. Take a career that's fulfilling, worthwhile, important, while also not burdening them with 4 lifetimes of debt. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you both being here. Thank you. Okay, our next panelist is the president of the Commission on Independent Colleges and Universities, Mary Beth Labate.
Afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator. Thank you for hosting this hearing on New York's pipeline to public service and for your focus on moving this conversation forward. Was in public service for 30 years, and I feel passionately about how important it is to attract young talent, and so I'm really glad that this conversation is happening. I'm Mary Beth Labate, and I'm pleased to join you today as president of the Commission on Independent Colleges and Universities, representing more than 100 private not-for-profit colleges and universities and nearly 500,000 students across New York. When we talk about careers in public service, we rightly think about careers in government, either as an elected official or working for the legislature or a state or local agency on policy issues. But what this, I think, hearing has really brought out is we also need to think about it in careers in nursing, teaching, engineering, among others. And that's where I think private not-for-profit colleges can be particularly helpful in ensuring a pipeline. We're responsible for educating many of the men and women who enter into public service. We confer 55% of degrees in political science and government, 65% of all nursing degrees in the state, 58% of degrees in public administration, and almost 60% of all degrees in teaching. We have 15 law schools in New York, and 13 of them are not-for-profits. And I think we know there's sometimes in the legal career, fortunately, there's this bent towards going into the public sector, and I think that's a really good thing to build upon. So how can we build stronger pipeline? I have 3 quick recommendations for you, and many of them you will have heard throughout this morning. I think students who have a natural bent towards public service must be given the tools to get there. Today I offer 3 suggestions. A first step is to provide financial aid to incentivize students to pursue careers in public service, which are seldom as lucrative as private sector careers. Currently, New York offers several grant and loan forgiveness programs designed to encourage graduates to enter certain careers. However, these programs are not well funded, nor are they well publicized. So as we look towards the future, New York has an opportunity to be a national leader and take a more comprehensive approach to instituting programs that incentivize students to enter public service. We've seen how other states incentivize students, including a recently announced program in California with their Civic Action Fellowship, awarding students up to $10,000 to put towards their college costs in exchange for 1 semester working in public service. In New York, I think we have a good example of an existing scholarship program that's designed to encourage more students to enter the teaching profession. Last year, the governor vetoed a bill that would extend this existing scholarship program to students who attend private colleges, despite the fact that our institutions confer more teaching degrees than any other sector. If we're going to be serious about public service, we have to take a holistic approach that incentivizes all students, not just those who attend public institutions. I think what makes our state work greatest is when we work as one higher education ecosystem. So we're always concerned when we see discussions, incentives that really focus on one or the other sector. We are great partners with SUNY and CUNY. They're great institutions, but we educate 500,000 students who also want to play a role in I think, the civic engagement, and that's where we hope that conversation will go. A second step, again, something you've heard today, is to provide exposure to meaningful internship experiences in public service. These internships should be paid. They should have a strong mentorship component, and they should give students the opportunity to see an array of public service possibilities, everything from not-for-profit management to working at the city, state, and local levels. Finally, I recommend reviewing the civil service system, as I know you're doing, to ensure that those interested in public service have adequate pathways in, particularly if we want to attract public service workforce that looks like the people that we are serving. We need to look past a one-size-fits-all. Today's young people are not really that keen on showing up on a Saturday morning to take a civil service test in all instances. And I think there are things that we can do and things that I know the state is moving towards that provide more flexibility so that you could take advantage of and give more credence to experiences and other factors when making selections in civil service. It's a different era than when I came through the civil service system. You took a test, and if you graded well on the test, you were in. That just doesn't resonate with young people anymore. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have, and I really do appreciate you taking up this topic.
Thank you very much. I think, just based on my last comments, the idea of public investment in scholarships and fellowships and incentives that way is something that I love the idea, and I'm really intrigued in probably exploring this idea more with yourself and a lot of the other panelists who spoke earlier today. I know it might be hard because you represent a lot of different institutions, but do you have a sense what number or percentage, even if it's a ballpark, of graduates from private universities or post-secondary institutions end up working in some form of governmental service at any level of government?
I don't have that. That's not data that's readily collectible. That's why I tried to give you a sense of the degrees we confer, because I think to some extent you can see that certain degrees will be more likely to lead someone into public service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I figured that would be a hard number to get. It'd be interesting, to your point about wanting to have one ecosystem of higher education, and I think the first step in kind of addressing this question or answering this question that we're here to explore is kind of mapping out, to the point I made earlier about how 50% of city teachers come from the CUNY system. Like, that's a data point that we should map out. I think we need to map out the entire parameters of this landscape so we understand
and that is data that the data on teachers who are in New York, that is data that's available. And I think CUNY has about half, and I think private not-for-profits
make up the rest,
confer the others.
Right, exactly. But just outside of the teaching context, understanding where we're pulling our public workers from, and whether they are there programs that are working really well at the SUNY level that a private college just doesn't know about that could be developed on their end, or vice versa. Are there great pipelines or opportunities? Maybe a great private university has a good relationship with their local county government, and they have a feeder line right into those positions, whereas the local public institution does not. I think so. I'd love to explore with you down the road how we can kind of map out some of that data a little bit more directly, because I think it'll help inform just where we take this discussion and how we can strengthen what's existing and build what needs to be built across the board. Do you have any insider information as to what existing partnerships may exist between individual private institutions and certain levels of government? Again, I know it might be a bit more anecdotal, but do you have any examples of good partnerships that we should look at as part of this?
Well, actually, I was intrigued by the partnership between CUNY and the city's workforce development. The one of your first speakers. Mm-hmm. We do that episodically across the state, mostly one-offs between ourselves and county governments. But I think what's really important is to start having those discussions again on a broader level. About the ecosystem. So one of the first things I did once once Barbara spoke is said, let's have those discussions with SUNY. Let's have those discussions with private not-for-profits. And I do think that's a forum that the state can provide for that. Mm-hmm. How do you bring together everyone to make certain that there are those pathways so that everyone's not kind of doing their own thing, which can be pretty inefficient.
Right. And it leads in some ways to just a a system built on either, institutional relationships, example, if the head of career development at NYU knows the
Right. That's how
DCAS
it-
commissioner, and like, okay, well, we need students for this, and that it's based on, nothing wrong with it, it's just based on a
Right.
relationship, but it's not capturing the full
Correct.
universe of students
Correct.
that we're trying to service and attract and recruit.
Correct. So we do career fairs. Every one of our
Yeah.
schools does multiple career
Mhm.
fairs, and we always have government partners there with us. But I do think a broader umbrella so that it's more organized would be really beneficial.
And do you think that there needs to be more done? It sounds like there's a lack of coordination in terms of whether it's on the government side or the institution side of coordinating, making sure. One of the panelists spoke about we come when we're invited type of thing, right? Do you think that there needs to be more proactive coordination on the government side, or that the higher education institutions should take on that kind of triaging is the wrong word, kind of concierge role, if you will, in bringing in the governmental partners for career fairs or trainings or workshops or whatever? Where do you see that?
My experience with our campuses is they are very intent on bringing in government to career fairs, making certain that students know about opportunities there. What I fear sometimes is that government might not always think about our students just because there is such a prominence of, say, CUNY here, or maybe SUNY in other areas. So I just think it's important to be part of that conversation, because we know when we are part of it, then our government partners say, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. You have talent too. So it's something that makes certain that those conversations are happening, that don't always rely on an institution reaching out to government and saying, we want to be helpful here.
Right. Okay. That's helpful. And lastly, do you have a sense, and I'm sure this data is publicly available, I just don't know it offhand, what the average debt load for a graduate of a private institution in New York is?
For a 4-year, for undergraduate degree, about 70% of students borrow, and the average is about $32,000 for all 4 years.
So they
total.
graduate with an average $32,000.
$32,000. And in contrast, SUNY students graduate with about $27,000, about a similar percentage of SUNY students graduate, and they graduate with about $27,000 a debt. You hear a lot about debt forgiveness, and I just want to put one data point on there for you. I think when you talk about borrowing, everyone wants to limit the amount of borrowing. Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, borrowing for, if you're making a choice between borrowing for a car and borrowing for your college education, I would encourage you to borrow for your college education before you jump in and buy that first car, because we know the return on investment is significant. When you look at the really, I think, the more concerning numbers on borrowing, when you look at the students who are borrowing $100,000 or more, that's about 5% of the overall student borrowing population. And what we see there, and it's interesting, the 5% who borrow over $100,000 are typically those who have gone on for graduate work, law school, medical school, engineering. They are also the highest percentage to repay because their investment has paid off. Would it be great and they're also part of the highest quintile now of family incomes. So more on the national stage, when people say, let's retire all debt, most experts will say to you, be careful about that, because there are students in lower income scales who are really struggling with borrowing. But when you say, let's retire all debt, let's forgive all debt, you're going to be benefiting perhaps higher income families than you may have thought. And I know that's not being debated at the state level, but I think it's just an interesting thing to understand about student borrowing. There are definitely pockets that struggle and that we should be addressing. And one way we should be addressing them is providing more financial aid. But there are also pockets, the majority of folks, thankfully, are able to service their loans. And I think that speaks to the value of a CUNY, SUNY, and a private education degree.
Do you know how many students you represent that work while they are enrolled in school?
I don't have that number.
I wonder, and I had this exchange with the CUNY chancellor at our budget hearing a couple weeks ago. We can say that X number of students graduate debt-free or minimal debt, which is great, and but sometimes that doesn't mean that they have 4 years scot-free where they're not working 2 or 3 jobs,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
In order to make that tuition payment
Yep.
and that rent payment and that room and board payment or whatever. And to the point that you raised about creating more experiential opportunities, if you are trying to graduate debt-free or minimal debt and you have to work 2 jobs, you might not have the ability to take that internship that'll get you on that into that pipeline.
Right.
So I'd be curious to know what numbers of those students are actually able to take on experiential learning in that way, and what percentage can't because they're struggling to make sure that they don't take on that
Right.
debt burden.
But I think where those could meld well is to create programs where that experiential learning is paid.
Sure.
So
right.
then they really
Yeah,
can
exa-
have
yeah, exactly.
the best of both.
Great. Thank you very much. Really
Okay.
appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next panel will be Michael Carbonaro, Matthew Estep, and Jessica Giorgio. The Melissa Riggio Higher Education Program at the College of Staten Island. All right. You guys waited a while. Thank you for your patience.
You're welcome.
Great. Whenever you're ready. Thank you.
So we're here from AHRC New York City and specifically the Melissa Riggio Higher Education Program. AHRC is the largest service provider in the state for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. First, we want to start by thanking you, Senator, for your ongoing support of this community. I know you met with our youngest students at the Brooklyn Blue Feather School last month and have met with several of our self-advocates in Albany last week and on an ongoing basis. And we really appreciate the support that you've given. But in terms of employment, the situation for people with disability is particularly stark. We're at a point where in the state, only 35% of people with disabilities are actually in the workforce. That's less than half of the general population. Those that are working are earning significantly less, about 20% less than their non-disabled colleagues. And as a result, they're much more likely to be living in poverty. We're trying to address this through education in the Melissa Riggio program, which Michael can tell you a lot more about.
Hello, Senator. Nice to see you again. I'm well, thank you. Anyway, the Melissa Riggio Higher Education Program really gave me the chance to soar to new heights. I mean, it gave me job skills, it gave me readiness for the real world, readiness for the workforce, and it really taught me how to compete in a competitive field for jobs. And I took a lot of college classes and did a lot of internship which included job training at both the Staten Island Pride Center and at the CSI LGBT Resource Center through the Office of Student Life. And I currently hold the job as a Staten Island Community Partnership Program Ambassador through the New York Foundling, which is Staten Island's Community Partnership Program. And I do it with the help and support of my wonderful mentors and my staff, including these two to my each side. And it's a really great opportunity. Go into the program, get job skills and readiness for the workforce.
Hello, my name is Jessica Giorgio, and I'm the program director for the Melissa Riggio program at the College of Staten Island and also BMCC down the block. I just want to give a little overview of the program so you could better understand what we do. The Melissa Riggio program has been around for over the past decade and has served over 184 students. The program is separated, the structure is in 4 different areas. Academics, which is really important. Students are on campus for 4 years and sit in as a non-matriculated basis in 2 college classes. Community life, which is really important to help students develop social skills and network themselves amongst their peers. Self-advocacy, which is another big tool that we push. And lastly, career exploration and self-discovery. People go to college to understand who they are and what their passions are, and that's something that is very important in our own curriculum. And all students, or at least most students, go to school because they want careers, and that's the same for our students. And that's the goal, that students will attend this post-secondary opportunity, participate in internships in their field of choice, both on campus and in their communities, and leave with the skills to be competitive in the workforce and have a meaningful career after they graduate.
Great, thank you. Where, so you said you have 184 students you've serviced over the last
10
decade, 10 years?
That's 10 years, yes.
That's 10 years. And how many students do you have in any given year? Like, how many students do you have right now in your program?
So at 3 campuses, we are a 4-year program and accept 5 students per cohort. And at BMCC, we're a 3-year program. So we accept 5 students per year, and we graduate 5 students.
Okay, great. And you help prepare for workforce development for any profession, not necessarily just in government or in some form of government. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. And have you had any placements in public sector positions of any kind at any level? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Have we?
So we've had a relatively low number of people who've worked in government sector jobs, both as graduates from the Melissa Riggio program and as well in the supported employment programs that we offer outside of the Melissa Riggio program. There are definitely some projects that people that we support are working in, but they're relatively small in number, and it's something that we would really like to see increased.
What, as you see it, what are the obstacles or barriers there? Is it a lack of communication with different partners in government? Is it, the training that you're providing not matching the training that's required? Where do you see the issues from your perspective?
Well, just to speak about the program a little bit, students attend on a non-matriculated basis, so they're not leaving with a college degree. So maybe more education that for maybe the government, that we have people that are skilled and also proud to go to work and excited. In the past, students with developmental disabilities did not have the opportunity to go to college, and however now they do. So going to school, having a job gives people identity, and our students want to work, and when they do, they're very successful because they're doing something that they feel passionate about.
Just to piggyback on what Jess said, we have a lot of students in our program that went on to jobs in the city. They got paid internships in the city. A lot of them did very, very well.
Okay, and so we have to figure out a way to kind of get them permanent placement in those jobs, I guess, is the next step.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In addition to the issues with the college degrees, many of the people that we support graduated with IEP diplomas or other alternate credentials from high school, which puts them at a significant disadvantage when looking for any kind of employment, whether it's in the public or private sector. And many people, when applying for jobs, if they don't have the ability to check that box that says, I have a high school diploma due to an alternative credential, the door's closed before they can meet with a hiring manager or get an interview, regardless of what other skills that person may possess.
Interesting.
And just to piggyback on what Matt said, we work really well with Senator Carlucci to pass a law about accepting an IEP diploma as a high school diploma to get into a job.
So I want to clarify, he created a bill that currently is in the Education Committee, S3890, which would allow that IEP diploma to serve for entry-level positions. It has not been passed, and in all honesty, is unlikely to leave the Education Committee. Though, if it does, we would really appreciate your support.
Okay.
We would love to have you back on this one.
I will. I'm telling my staff who's sitting behind me to pull the bill so I can review it when I get back to my office. I'll definitely take a look at that. But thanks for bringing that
Sounds
my
wonderful.
attention.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michael, let me ask you, what was the biggest benefit for you for the program, and what would you like to see expanded or made better about the program?
Well, the biggest benefit. That's a really good question. That's a really great question, man. The biggest benefit was helping me to like find my voice and help me find my career, find my interests, go explore outside my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would love to see for future expansion is for other students like me to step out their comfort zone, for them to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's good.
And finding their career, stepping outside what they're known for.
Mm-hmm. And would you ever want to work for the city or the state or, in some capacity, in some way, shape, or form?
Hey, I'm up for a challenge.
Okay, well, what would you want to do?
I don't know, like maybe teach special education theater.
Okay. So it seems like we need to find a pathway to kind of get you into that type of placement.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you all for testifying and really adding an extra shade of color to this discussion. I think it's really important. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up we are going to have Adamola Alolu and Leah Gonzalez from the Public Employees Federation. Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ademola Oluwo. I am here today on behalf of my union, the Public Employees Federation, PEF, where I am both a council leader and executive board member. I am also a state government employee at the Department of Financial Services. I've worked in public service for 32 years. Thank you very much, Senator Gonadis, for the opportunity to testify today on the idea of establishing a civil service pipeline in which graduating students are trained for and recruited directly into public sector jobs. As a longtime public servant and a member of the public sector workforce for more than 3 decades, I'm certainly aware and agree that a public sector career with the state of New York can be rewarding, both financially and in the nature of the work. In addition, it offers job stability, security, flexibility, and the ability to retire with a good pension in dignity. PEF represents over 52,000 professional, scientific, and technical employees in the state workforce. Many PEF members are reaching retirement age, and we agree that as the state workforce ages out, it is important to attract young people and give them a reason to consider public sector employment. For example, PEF represents over 9,000 public sector RNs who work in SUNY hospitals, OMH, OPWDD, OCFAs, and Department of Corrections facilities. Most folks have likely heard about the nursing shortage in the state and the need for patient staffing ratio. The RN recruitment and retention problem is even worse for public sector nurses due to low salaries compared to private hospitals and poor working conditions. Specific RN pipeline program targeted toward recruiting students out of high school and college that offer tuition reimbursement benefits, loan forgiveness, and the opportunity to pursue advanced nursing degrees at a lower cost could help attract more young people into the nursing profession. However, increasing public sector RN salaries and improving work conditions is essential in restoring nursing as a desirable career path. While we welcome creative pipeline ideas targeted to increase the ranks of the civil service and state workforce, we must go on record adamantly opposing any plan that will circumvent the civil service system. Non-competitive appointment should be made when competitive exam is not practicable. Exam placement should only be made when position cannot be competitively tested or a confidential relationship exists. Several years ago, Governor Cuomo implemented a program known as the Empire State Fellows Program. The program was essentially a 2-year fellowship for young professionals and recent college graduates, where at the end of the 2-year program, the fellows will be given an opportunity to serve as public policy leaders in New York State government without having to take a civil service exam. We believed then, and we still believe now, that programs such as the Empire State Fellows disregard the long-standing New York State constitutional safeguard that civil service position will be made according to merit and fitness by way of a competitive examination. We've seen the negative impact this has on current, diligent, dedicated, competent, knowledgeable, and hardworking employees' morale. Due to complexity and involving nature of the business, it takes an average of 4 years before anyone can have a basic understanding and knowledge of the work we do. PEF represents dedicated, highly skilled public servants who are proud to have earned their position through the competitive process, free from the taint of cronyism and nepotism associated with non-competitive appointments. While we welcome new, younger workers to our union ranks and plan that circumvent the civil service system will further erode the very system we as public servants are supposed to be working under. The leadership of PEF has looked at ways to bring young people into the state workforce by educating them about what it means to be a member of a union and the value unions bring to all the communities in New York State. We are the people who provide vital public services to all New Yorkers. In closing, we will welcome partnering with you in your efforts to attract young people to the state workforce, as long as it is through the established civil service system. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I will take your question.
Thank you very much. You talked about, ways that you've looked to bring younger members and the next generation of workers into the system. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What efforts does the union do to attract and market to younger members, recruit people for potential employment in government? Just speak a little bit more about your ongoing efforts.
In the last few years, PEF has engaged in several community outreach. We go out to the different fairs. Anytime we have the opportunity to go to the college campuses, where we also have some of our members, we talk to the students about the opportunities that are available out there and in terms of what they can do to really join the ranks. So these are things PEF has done and we continue to do for the community.
One of the things we heard from the students who testified earlier was their desire for more flexibility in how they approach what they look for in a career path and what they look for in career opportunities. How do you think we can balance the concerns that you raised versus what students who are graduating today are looking for in employment opportunities?
I believe some of that can be done by allowing for other alternatives that private companies offer their employees out there, like telecommuting, having alternate work schedule where there is more flexibility in terms of the time or the hours employees work. And these are some things that the union have engaged the state on, and we hope currently I believe there are some programs out there for Department of Labor and Department of Transportation, a pilot program where they're exploring some of these as we speak. And we believe this will be things that we encourage young people to come into public workforce as well.
What retention issues do you see facing the workers that you represent? The workers that are leaving, why are they leaving? Is it just because they're aging out? And what could we be doing structurally to help retain those workers that we currently have? What do you think?
At DFS, because we regulate the insurance and banking industries, some of our counterparts, they see how much the federal government pays their employees. That's number one. They are paid more than the state. And the fact that in recent years we've seen a lot of non-competitive positions filling those job opportunities that we regularly go to our members. For a lot of employees, once they start seeing that, they believe their promotion opportunity or career is kind of done. So they look at other places where they can advance.
Do you have a sense of, from your membership, kind of the same question I asked CSEA, how many of them are college graduates and what their debt load, if any, might be from student loans? Do you keep that information? Do you have access to it?
I don't have access to that information.
I would say that most of our members are actually college graduates by nature of membership in PEF. We represent professional, scientific, and technical workers in state government, and many of the titles, it's over 3,000 titles represented by PEF, actually require an undergraduate degree. Now, as to do we have a sense of how much their student loan debt is, I don't know. We can take that question back and try to find out. I imagine, as someone who's actually not a millennial, but as a Gen Xer, I still have undergraduate debt, which I'm only seeing sort of like I'm in the final stretch. You know, I think I'll finally have it paid off in the next year or two. So I would suspect that a significant number of them do. In fact, it does come up often in membership meetings, is various ways for student debt relief. I wanted to just make a few quick points.
Sure. Yeah.
As long as Ada, were you done?
Go ahead.
I noticed, throughout the morning that there were some folks, some witnesses who were testifying on behalf of local governments, who view the civil service system and the merit and fitness system as an obstacle or a challenge. I think that we would argue that it shouldn't be looked at as an obstacle. It should just be looked at as a tool, a proven tool that produces a qualified, experienced, and values-driven candidate pool. Just very recently, we have PEF members, state firefighters through DISHES, the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, who assisted with the response to flooding in upstate New York. And in fact helped rescue an infant who they then handed off to the governor. We represent scientists at Wadsworth Laboratories who are working very diligently to get to the bottom of the vaping and e-cigarette deaths, as well as the coronavirus. We had RNs, SUNY RNs, who took their own vacation time to volunteer in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in 2017, and we have fire prevention specialists and building inspectors who are in Puerto Rico now, over 24, I believe, on their own taking their own vacation time to help the residents of the island in the aftermath of the earthquake. And lastly, because it's incredibly courageous, there are career civil servants who are fighting to preserve the integrity of the U.S. Department of Justice.
even at their own expense. So I just highlight these examples to underscore that the system works, in producing experienced and incredibly dedicated public servants.
No doubt, for sure. There's obviously very large number of our public workers who are doing incredible work and jobs that are absolutely critical and fundamental to not just the daily operation of the state, but just addressing more global issues and crises and humanitarian issues and whatnot. So there's no doubt about that. You had mentioned specifically nursing. And challenges with recruiting and retaining nurses, especially at the public level. And you laid out some of the challenges. In your experience or to your understanding, do you find that there are nurse candidates who don't want to take the positions, or there is a lack of available candidates to even, recruit in the first place?
I would say it's probably both. So we've actually had our RN leaders discuss these issues with the Department of Health as part of their safe staffing study that they've been conducting. But the public sector RN civil service title and the including the grade and the job description has not been updated in years. So when we make reference to the fact that one of the obstacles is incredibly low pay, I believe it literally hasn't been updated since like the 80s. Okay. So the grade is low, the job description hasn't been updated, and the working conditions are very challenging because of the nature of being short-staffed and the nature of having to at times often work back-to-back shifts, and at times having to work overtime, and at times not being able to eat lunch or take breaks. So what our members have been telling us is that even younger nurses who are coming in and saying, let's say at SUNY Stony Brook or downstate because because they have a job offer, they're coming in, they're seeing how difficult the job is, they're overworked, the pay is not good, the pay is better at nonprofit hospitals and teaching hospitals, and and they can't plan for vacations, they sometimes have to work back-to-back shifts, so some of them don't stay very long. The turnover is very high. And then it's hard to get RNs, back in the door. The Department of Health themselves, who have RNs on their inspector teams, have basically said, like, we know we're experiencing the same problems in trying to get RNs, to come work for us. So it is, it's a complicated issue,
right?
That is not just specific to public sector nursing, but across all nursing, and any kind of pipeline that can be created that can at least offer a better quality of work life, like planned vacations and like knowing, that you won't have to work, overtime on certain days because colleagues are out sick just by virtue of the fact that there's not enough nurses. Those can go a long way. As well as, tuition remission and tuition assistance with getting advanced degrees. RNs in New York State now are required to get a BSN. Those costs are not necessarily defrayed.
Yeah, no, thank you, and that's very, very helpful. One of the reasons I asked is because, as I understand it, one of the problems we have, especially with nursing, is the lack of available clinical spots for nurses to get the clinical training they need in order to get their degrees, and so we're seeing a shortage of nurses across the board, which I think then further exacerbates the challenges you just identified, because now they're more in demand, and so when you can't be competitive on some of the compensation or work balance factors, it makes the choice for the nurses that are left a lot easier to go towards a private sector placement than to work in the public sector.
Exactly, and actually one of the consequences, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this on behalf of our RN leaders, is that public hospitals and even private hospitals will then, sort of deal with the staffing crunch by bringing in private agency RNs who are essentially like part-time per diem. They're not civil service, they're not union. They get paid a lot more than, you know, the rank and file nurses, and they are not subject to having to cover double shifts or not being able to take vacation, you know. So it's a really frustrating situation for our nurses that you know, hopefully something can be done about soon as we await the state's RN safe staffing study.
You've answered all my questions. So thank you very much. Really
Thank
appreciate
you
you
very
being
much.
here.
Thank you for inviting us to participate.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. All right. And then there were 2 panels left, so we're getting there. Our next panel will be Lisa Futterman from the Workforce Development Institute and Dan Cullen, also from WDI. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Senator Gurnardis, for the invitation to appear today. My name is Lisa Futterman, and I'm the New York City Regional Director for the Workforce Development Institute. WDI is a statewide nonprofit and partner to organized labor that works to grow and keep good jobs in New York State. We use a range of tools to facilitate projects that build workforce skills and strengthen employers' ability to hire, promote, and retain workers. You've expressed an interest in developing a pipeline of skilled workers to feed New York's public service jobs. I'd like to provide a few workforce trends from the field that have been identified by WDI and are relevant to this discussion. 1, it's a tight labor market. Many employers are projecting significant retirements within the next 5 years, with both the public and private sectors competing for the same workforce. 2, despite this tight labor market, there remains a significant population that is either underemployed, and that includes college grads, or has struggled to find quality jobs. 3, the public is largely unaware of many career opportunities and the education or experience that they require. In response to these trends, WDI has spent a significant amount of time in the manufacturing, construction, IT, and healthcare sectors on 2 types of initiatives to develop pipelines of workers. Both initiatives have paid off. The first initiative is expansion of career awareness and exposure events aimed at boosting the profile of good jobs that are going unfilled. We have partnered with unions and employers to connect educators and students to information about career paths, including the education required to pursue them. Employers must be very involved in this effort to ensure its success. We believe that similar career awareness efforts aimed at both local communities and at college career centers would yield similar results for civil service. We also recommend that outreach efforts include current civil service workers who can talk about what they do, their career trajectories, and how public service jobs have led to financial self-sufficiency. The second initiative is pre-employment training. In our work developing skilled worker pipelines, we have encountered situations where employers have required pre-employment training of candidates. In these cases, the best practice is to develop customized training in response to industry demand. This is done with a wide range of partners, including employers, unions, and training providers. In developing a pipeline of workers for civil service, similar pre-employment training efforts could be helpful, including test preparation and/or targeted training when a specific certification or knowledge is required. We recommend that these efforts be closely aligned with civil service. In closing, we believe that civil service jobs hold great promise in terms of career growth and financial security. We agree with you that development of a large and talented pool of potential public employees is an effort that is both timely and necessary. We will do whatever we can to help in this effort. Thank you.
Can you, and I appreciated, that in both your recommendations, you talk about including current civil service workers. Can you kind of sketch out in your conception, what that could look like and how that should work, and what you think would be really, how we can really tap into that?
Sure. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll take that answer. It's based on what we've done in the other industries that Lisa mentioned. So our staff mostly works with, we meet with about 1,000 different entities across the state in a given year. We mostly work in those other sectors that were mentioned. So it would be manufacturing, construction, IT, and healthcare. And we've found that people want to see people who look like them, first of all, in these careers. They want to understand that there are people who are just maybe a few years older than them, that have been sitting where they are while they're making decisions about careers, who can tell them what the actual first years look like. I mean, it's one thing to talk about wages. It's one thing to talk about retirement and long-term benefits. But it's another thing to talk about lifestyle. It's something to talk about what this actually affords me. You know, a lot has been said today about the dignity of public service, and I fully agree and support that. And I think there's something to be said there, too, for young people. Millennials have been accused of killing a lot of things. We've been accused of killing landlines and chain restaurants, and I don't want us to be the generation that kills public service by any means. And I think we also been accused of being.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, you know, I think we've been
stealing
accused.
that one.
Please do.
Mine, yeah.
That's why I'm here today, to give you whatever you need. So I don't want us to, you know, to make. Well, we've also been accused of being idealist. That is where I was going with this, and you know, stop being a dreamer, stop thinking you can change the world. And public service is about thinking I can change my corner of the world. And I think we need to appeal to that in young people. So when we talk about career awareness events, actually bring some of your young staff people. Don't bring the people where it's a benefit. They've been there for many, many years. It's good for them to get out for the day. Bring young people who can actually tell that story. Or better yet, create content that helps to tell that story, by which I mean something that could be shown on social media, short videos. I'm told these are called thumb stoppers. These are things that as we're scrolling through, we look at them and maybe they're 30 seconds, maybe they're a minute. And it talks about not just what my job is, but who I am. And I base this on something that we did with a semiconductor plant up in the Saratoga Springs area. They make computer chips. And if you walk across their parking lot, you'll hear 5 different languages being spoken. But people from the surrounding community were not applying to jobs there. So they said, what can we do to help people understand that it's not just engineers, it's not just people that we're bringing in from around the world. We have people who are, you know, musicians in your community, people who are, you know, living their lives and enjoying their lives, and are able to do that because of the work that they do at this company. So they created a video series where it basically it led with, I'm a musician and I work at blank. And it talked about how, you know, the work that they do helps to afford a certain lifestyle. And these are people in their, you know, late 20s at the oldest, I think, telling this story. And those are shown at schools. Those are also available online.
Great, thank you. In the areas where you've worked already, in manufacturing, construction, healthcare, IT, has that been more on the private side, or has that been a hybrid of both, or can you kind of just
mostly private sector? Yeah.
So let me ask another version of that question. Sure. What is your experience in partnering with the public sector on developing the education and credentials and skills and experiences for those similar positions on the other side of the table?
So what we've been able to do so far is really, it's more helping with the incumbent current workforce of state government and local government by working in partnership with folks like CSEA, where we help to provide funding and assistance in development of test preparation materials for their members for promotional opportunities. But I think there's room to expand that to community organizations that might need test prep for the PCO that was mentioned earlier today. You know, people who haven't taken a test in a while or have never taken a state exam have no idea what it looks like. And the questions are not skill-based. They're very much like SATs, if I remember correctly. It's been a few years since I've taken one, where you have to know what you're looking at. And if you go in there blind, you're not going to have any clue exactly what you're looking at.
I would just add to that, for example, we work with DC 37 here in the city, and we're currently talking with them about how to support a new leadership academy that they're developing, and that really is aimed at getting young people and members from diverse backgrounds into leadership positions within the union and outside of the union, and as well as preparation for running for public office. So Dan's right, a lot of times that's around supporting efforts around the incumbent workers, but that's then making space for more young people to come in and for the union in this case to really be thinking about what are going to be those leadership stepping stones that they can help young people to evolve into those leadership roles.
Good. That's great. Thank you. Based on your experiences, what would you identify as to kind of ramp up the model that you're talking about? What are some of the roadblocks or obstacles that you see in terms of getting something like this operational, even in just a informal setting? What are some of the kind of the perils and pitfalls to watch out for, or things to be cognizant of as we try to mimic or mirror, what you've talked about?
I mean, one of the things is just we get involved in a lot of projects on a pilot basis. So we're there to help it launch, ideally, and help it provide proof of concept that it needs to continue. And then we are unable to continue funding these things year after year after year in many cases. So there probably would be some need for ongoing funding, I'd imagine. I don't know if you had anything else there.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think like what Dan said is about bringing in people that reflect the young people, someone they can identify with. I think that's really true, that if you bring in people that young people aren't going to identify with, you're not going to be as successful. One program that we've supported that's been really successful is a pre-apprenticeship program here in the city called Pathways to Apprenticeship. Mm-hmm. And, they are assisting, people that are coming out of prison, people coming out of foster care, people that have had a lot of barriers to not only just getting into employment, but entry into a union apprenticeship program. Mm-hmm. And all of the trainers they use have come through the program and really reflect the communities and the people that are they're trying to connect to those careers and be excited about it and really make that commitment to staying. And it just makes a huge difference when the people coming in and speaking or doing the training reflect the folks that are being served.
We've heard two differing viewpoints on creating fellowships and opportunities, kind of interim positions that way. What is your thoughts? Is that a model that is worthwhile? Is it not? Can we improve that? Can we conceive of it in some way? What do you think?
I think internship and career exposure, the more the better, across the board, whether we're speaking about what we're speaking about today or if I was talking to private sector businesses, the more opportunity you have for somebody to try before they buy, especially in and I mean that from both ways, by the way. I mean it from the employer side and from the employee side. We're in a very tight labor market where when you're interviewing somebody, they're interviewing you as well. So having them see what the job really looks like and there's some value in people self-selecting out of employment as well before they get too deep into it and there's not something else they can do. So I'm all about the more career exposure, the better, whether it's, short-term things like field trips, literally field trips sometimes, but also things like a year fellowship, absolutely would support that.
You mentioned, the tight labor market, but then also the underemployment component of that. Can you kind of flesh that out a little bit? Forgive my ignorance here. I don't quite see the two going together. So can you just walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, we might have approximately 4% unemployment, but there's at least, by a lot of estimates, 10% above that, where people are maybe working multiple jobs. They're not showing up on our unemployment rolls, of course, but they're not in career trajectory jobs. They're not in jobs in fields that maybe they have degrees for. Maybe they are the folks who have considerable college debt and are at risk of defaulting and therefore then losing out on future opportunities, as was explained by a previous panelist. So they are also the hardest group of people to find because they're working. It's hard to get them to, with the balance that they have to do with their family life and one or two jobs or more, it's very hard to get them to be able to drop everything and try something new, especially if it's unpaid. So the more opportunities that we have for paid things like paid internships, paid training, that can help somebody who is just barely scraping by not fall off a cliff or fall off a benefit cliff in order to better themselves through education and training.
I also think with like the large immigrant community, particularly here in the city, there are a lot of people that have degrees from their native country that are doing jobs that are well below, that qualification level. So I think that makes up a good percentage of the workforce here in New York City. Probably other parts of the state as well.
I'm just jotting that down actually because I thought that was a good point. Okay. I think those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you very much for your patience and for being here and for your sharing your testimony. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator. Appreciate the invitation.
Okay, our next and last panelist is trustee of the City University of New York, Michael Arvanites. Michael, thank you for closing us out here.
I'm happy to be your Mariano Rivera. Senator, thank you for letting me come and speak today on an issue of great importance and something I know that's near and dear to your heart. You cited earlier the majority of teachers at the Board of Education are CUNY grads. That's an excellent example of pipelining. That's a de facto pipeline. But for instance, DOE has plenty of para positions they can't fill, plenty of school safety, plenty of crossing guard positions that they have been able to fill that could be done by either existing students or students that are looking to supplement income. So that might be a natural connection with the Department of Education. You might not be aware of HHC and OMH are actually just under a majority of the nurses and nurse practitioners are actually CUNY grads. And HHC also needs paras and orderlies and maintenance workers. That might be something of a direct connect for something of a existing de facto pipeline that we could perhaps turn from a spigot to a geyser. So those are two instances where we have existing relationships between CUNY and two or three existing agencies. Also, we're concentrating on graduates, but part of retention and part of what CUNY is doing now is trying to make sure we can employ our students while they're working. You correctly pointed out that almost 70% of them graduate without debt, and that's because they're working while they're going to school. If they could find employment with the city, state, or the authorities, that would supplement and retain their existence at CUNY and would certainly do that. We have nursing programs at Lehman, York, Hunter, where I know you're a professor, and the College of Staten Island, which do provide almost a majority of the nurses that are available in HHC. One thing that I came up with that I thought would be advantageous is on-campus testing. Recently, CSI opened an annex in the same building with the DCAS testing center, and then subsequently, a couple months later, DCAS moved to another building, unfortunately. But if the students saw the available testing on campus and had it in their own environment, that might be an opportunity to show them that taking those civil service exams, having the opportunity to sign up for them would be advantageous. The city and state legislature does an excellent job of hiring CUNY staff and also disabled. You heard from the Melissa Ruggiero program earlier. The mailroom in Albany, the messenger service in this very building for the city council is almost exclusively staffed by people with disabilities, people that aren't CUNY graduates or SUNY graduates, but have some college, some credentials, some stackable credentials. I come from a construction background. Even when I was in government, I worked on mega projects and capital construction projects. I had my OSHA 30 and my SST card and my construction fire safety. There's a flyer in my testimony, which I've drifted from, that the MTA is desperately seeking elevator and escalator mechanics. They just recently upped the pay to a robust $84.50 per hour, which is better than the state senate pays. Unfortunately, after a year-long search, they still have 200 plus available positions, and it would bring me particular joy as both a CUNY and higher education advocate and as a disabled advocate if people with disabilities could earn the stackable credentials to make the city, their transit system, which I know is near and dear to your heart, more accessible for themselves and for their fellow disabled people. and these MTA jobs are the tip of the iceberg with the authorities. I feel that's a particularly ground that we should till is the Port Authority, the MTA, the Power Authority. There are a lot of jobs that are non-degree, non-competitive that we seem to not be able to fill, and that might be able to fit in either existing CUNY students or somebody who has a little bit of college or a stackable credential. Presently, LaGuardia, Hostos, and Kingsborough Community Colleges conduct stackable credential classes and certifications for all kinds of construction-related work. The city and state would be remiss if they didn't tap into this potential hive of CUNY students. They could solve our infrastructure problems while solving our own retention problems. 500,000 CUNY students, most of whom are first in their family, go to college. They live here. They want to build a life here. They're not really going anywhere. We see that with the teachers that we develop for the Board of Education. And let me lastly just say, so if they can go to school and pay for school while they're doing these stackable credentials, and actually it's pretty fairly well paid organization. A basic laborer on a mega construction site can make $30 an hour. A flagger makes $17. That's better than the baseline $15 per hour minimum wage. And there are people with disabilities that can do that. There are people who are going into other professions that can see. We don't just, on mega construction sites, we just don't have engineers, architects, people with advanced degrees. There are people that are safety professionals like myself, or people all at entry-level positions, flagger, and they can start there and go anywhere in the construction field. CUNY itself, half of our buildings are over 50 years old. We're the 8th largest real estate owner in the city of New York. We're going to be redeveloping many of our own campuses, and currently, as you see in Kingsborough, we're doing that presently. It'd be endearing to me if we could have CUNY students or somebody who has a credential from CUNY actually rebuilding CUNY itself. So those are just some of the thoughts that I wanted to share today. And I can tell you the Board of Trustees is 1,000% behind you.
Oh, thank you very, very much. And I really appreciate this really specific ideas you've kind of come to us with. Gives us a lot of things to kind of knock off on our punch list rather quickly, I think, as we're diving into this. To what extent do you know CUNY is already having conversations with the MTA, the Port Authority, NYPA, all those, you mentioned DOE as a natural, you mentioned DOH as a natural.
That sort of came together naturally, yeah. DOE for some reason, and HHC with the nursing program, even though that could be expanded as well. We could also shift some of the people that don't make it into the nursing program into the nurse practitioner, into a phlebotomy program so that they could service that industry, or perhaps even an orderly or some sort of healthcare professional that they can go into. If you want to become a nurse but you don't have the GPA or the time to do it, then maybe you want to be in the healthcare field, and then you can advance yourself through it as you see fit. The authorities, I feel like they need to step up with what they've done for outreach. They're as I said with the MTA, they're desperately seeking elevator and escalator mechanics, and they haven't come to any of the people that are doing those credentials, stackable credentials, and teaching them presently. So that's something, I think, low-hanging fruit that they could go after.
Okay, we can definitely follow up with them on that. Are there, and I didn't get a chance to ask this of the Melissa Ruggiero program, but what do you think it would take to scale that program up? Is it purely a financial cost? Is it more than that? And kind of where do you see the future of that going?
Well, it is financial, but it's also, think about the savings to the state. If I have a disabled person working for the city or state, for CUNY or for the Power Authority, they have excellent benefits. They're accessing those benefits to solve their own mental or intellectual disabilities or their physical disabilities. Then the state isn't laying that out for them through SSI or through Medicaid. So it's not just a front-end financial picture, it's also what are we saving on the back end. If this person can, first of all, they're excellent workers. They show up on time. They do an excellent job. But the fact that they can access those benefits as a worker, as opposed to somebody with disabilities who's accessing the Medicaid system, that would be a savings to the state. So the way to ramp it up is AHRC is the largest in the state, but there's got to be hundreds of. I know of 7 on Staten Island, where I live myself, that could do similar program, not in competition, but could do it for their own program participants. Especially if there was a dedicated job waiting at the end of the rainbow for, here, take these 2 classes, get a credential, maybe we'll put you on a track to an associate's degree, but there's a job at the end of this.
Right. And what other, if you can speak, if you have any knowledge of kind of just employment statistics from CUNY at large, we were not able to have the workforce team here today, but do you have any understanding or knowledge of that, and where we're currently placing students, globally? What percentage of our students are going into government work versus public or private work?
We do an excellent job with the Goldman Sachses, the Chases of the world. We're currently training the majority of tellers that JP Morgan Chase takes on. I think we could easily translate that into public service. And several speakers mentioned it earlier. This generation does seem to actually have that idealism that both you and I share, and want to do more for their hometown and their country. And I think it's easily translatable. So if we could do it for Chase and we could do it for Goldman Sachs, we can certainly do it for the MTA or for the Power
Anyone else?
Authority. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
But I don't know where we are on any of those.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll follow up, and I think the workforce team is going to send us written testimony that we'll dive deeper into. But just knowing that you're thinking about it and that other trustees are thinking about it is obviously very helpful as we're trying to come up with this deeper understanding of this question, really, of how do we do this, and how do we do this thoughtfully and properly and sustainably in a way that gets us all to where we want to be. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for waiting to the very end. Really appreciate it. And again, thank you for the specific recommendations on those specific placements. We'll work on those. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And with that, I will say thank you to everyone who stuck it out. You guys are true champions. There'll be complimentary fanny packs given out as you leave to thank you for being here. We're going to take what we've gleaned today, follow up on some of the questions that were raised, and really work with our Higher Education Committee, Consumer Protection Committee, as well as others, and try to come up with some type of a report that we were able to, broad strokes, put together what we've learned as part of this process and see where we go from here. So I thank you all for participating.